Earth is a colossal creation that has existed for billions of years. If we could visualize its age, it would be like an hourglass, where each grain of sand represents an entire epoch. Time on the planet flows like a river, winding through landscapes and leaving traces in the form of mountains, oceans, and plains. All of human history, from the first people who began to gather stone tools to modern megacities with their skyscrapers, occupies only a minuscule fraction of this endless flow of time. For instance, if we imagine that the entire history of Earth from its formation occupies 1 year, human life would fit into the last seconds of that year, and all recorded human experience would be just a moment, barely more than a minute. This makes us ponder the insignificance of our concerns and achievements in the face of the grand processes that have occurred on the planet. Over millions of years, Earth has undergone colossal changes. Continents have drifted, volcanoes have erupted, and glaciers have covered vast areas. Imagine how in just one day, such events could change the face of Earth forever, while we, humans, can only observe their aftermath. For example, the eruption of Krakatoa in 1883 caused global climate changes that lasted for many years. Each layer of rock, hiding millions of years of history, can be seen as pages of a book written by nature itself. These pages are filled with records of ancient seas, when the current deserts were teeming with oceans, and of times when dinosaurs ruled the earth for millions of years before giving way to mammals. Compare this with human history, which spans only a few thousand years, and you will understand how ephemeral our achievements are. Humanity emerged amidst gigantic geological processes that shaped us as we are now. Epochs such as Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic created conditions for the development of life in the most diverse forms. Each new period was like a new chapter in the history of our planet, filled with amazing discoveries and catastrophes that left their mark. An example is the mass extinction that occurred around 66 million years ago, which ended the age of dinosaurs and paved the way for mammals and, ultimately, for humans. This event is an integral part of our heritage, which shaped ecosystems and the climate in which we live today. If Earth could speak, it would tell of its journey through time, of its ups and downs, of its catastrophes and rebirths. We are just tiny sparks in this grand time, and our existence, without a doubt, is not the culmination of the planet's history. We must remember that, despite our achievements, we are only temporary passengers in this endless expanse of time that continues to flow. In this context, human life and our entire civilization are just a brief moment in the eternal history of Earth, which continues to develop like a river, never stopping for a moment. The Earth in its earliest state was a molten fiery sphere where chaos and madness reigned. About 4 billion years ago, when the planet was just forming, its surface was scorching and consisted of liquid magma, with temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. Volcanic activity was so intense that constant eruptions spewed enormous quantities of lava and ash into the atmosphere, creating a spectacle that could be compared to an unending fireworks display, except instead of bright lights, there were fiery streams merging into a burning sea. Each volcanic explosion ejected tons of molten rock, forming new mountain ranges where there had been no life before. The heat from the Earth's core was unbearable. Even hundreds of kilometers from the epicenters of eruptions, the heat was comparable to that in a furnace. A mixture of toxic gases, such as carbon dioxide, ammonia, and methane, created a dense and impenetrable atmosphere that hid this fiery sea from space, making visibility practically nil. Like a veil, it blocked the path of sunlight, creating a gloomy and somber atmosphere where there was neither day nor night. The constant roar of explosions and eruptions was reminiscent of the roars of wild beasts, merging with the roar of molten magma streams that shook the planet's surface, while rivers of lava flowing down the slopes of volcanoes left only charred traces behind. The temperature was so high that metals like gold and copper existed in liquid form, forming bright, shiny streams, like rivers of molten gold flowing down volcanic slopes. Since the Earth was still in the process of formation, its surface was covered with craters and vast plains where molten rock solidified, forming new layers of crust. This primordial chaos, dominated by volcanoes and fiery rains, created conditions completely unsuitable for life as we know it. As the planet continued to cool, new minerals and elements formed, which later became the basis for the formation of life. Hundreds of millions of years during which the Earth remained in this state determined its geological structure and climatic conditions. The intensity of volcanic activity varied, but constant eruptions created new landscapes, and cooling magma formed the first continents. This fiery sphere, surrounded by clouds of toxic gases, became the foundation for the further development of the planet, which over billions of years would transform into a state suitable for life. The formation of early Earth began approximately 4.5 billion years ago, when cosmic dust and debris, created by stellar explosions, began to slowly accumulate under the influence of gravity. These particles, primarily composed of silicates and metals, were drawn together, forming increasingly larger objects known as protoplanets. At this stage, the solar system was characterized by a chaotic environment where collisions between celestial bodies occurred regularly. The protoplanet that would eventually become Earth grew due to countless collisions with asteroids and comets, which served as not only sources of water but also energy. Each impact released a tremendous amount of heat, leading to the melting of part of the material. During this melting process, heavier elements such as nickel and iron began to sink towards the center, forming the core, while lighter elements remained on the surface, creating the mantle and crust. These processes occurred over millions of years, and each collision added not only mass, but also complexity to the planet's structure. As the protoplanet grew, its temperature rose to thousands of degrees, also contributing to the formation of the first magma oceans. Thus, the continuous accumulation of matter and collisions determined not only the mass, but also the internal structure of Earth, which ultimately became the foundation for the formation of the atmosphere and hydrosphere. These primary processes created the conditions necessary for the subsequent emergence of life. Approximately 100 million years after the beginning of formation, this protoplanet reached sufficient size to become the predecessor of the modern world in which we live. Key elements such as oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen began to combine, forming the first water molecules and organic compounds. These events laid the foundation not only for the formation of Earth, but also for the emergence of life on our planet. The process of Earth's differentiation began when the planet was in a molten state and lasted for millions of years. In this hot state, the material of Earth was in the form of a homogeneous mixture consisting of various materials. Gradually, due to gravity, heavier elements began to move towards the center. This process can be compared to the separation of oil and water in a glass. Oil, being less dense, rises to the surface, while water, being more dense, remains at the bottom. In the case of Earth, heavier materials such as iron and nickel sank into the molten core, forming the central part of the planet. Lighter elements like silicon and oxygen rose to the surface, forming the mantle and crust. This process occurred due to the difference in density, leading to the natural separation of substances. Closer to the center, where pressure and temperature are significantly higher, heavier elements formed solid and liquid phases, while on the surface, lighter minerals capable of crystallization at lower temperatures were formed. As the planet cooled, a solid crust formed on its surface, while beneath it, there remained molten and semi-liquid layers. It is important to note that the process of differentiation was not instantaneous. It lasted for more than 100 million years, allowing Earth to acquire its unique structure. As the planet formed, the first continents and oceans began to emerge on its surface, becoming the basis for further life development. The separation of matter and the formation of various layers also contributed to the emergence of Earth's magnetic field when molten iron in the core began to move, creating electric currents. This process became the basis for the formation of Earth's structure, which ultimately allowed life to develop. Differentiation not only created various layers, but also more complex geological processes such as volcanic activity and plate tectonics, which continue to change the surface of our planet to this day. Each layer of Earth has its unique composition and physical properties, making the planet dynamic and ever-changing. The formation of Earth's core occurred as a result of a complex process in which heavy metals like iron and nickel gradually sank towards the center of the planet under the influence of gravity. As the molten material cooled during the early stages of Earth's existence, lighter elements remained closer to the surface, while heavier elements like iron and nickel moved downward, creating a clear differentiation between layers. This process took millions of years and ultimately led to the formation of the inner and outer core. The pressure at the depth where the core is located reaches colossal values, on the order of 3.5 million atmospheres. Such pressure compresses iron into a solid state, forming the inner core with a radius of about 1,200 kilometers. The outer core, surrounding the inner core, remains in a liquid state due to high temperatures exceeding 6,000 degrees Celsius. This temperature is sufficient to melt iron and nickel, despite the immense pressure. The formation of the core became possible due to a complex interaction between gravity, heat, and the physical properties of materials. The liquid outer core is responsible for creating Earth's magnetic field, which protects the planet from solar wind and cosmic radiation. The inner core consists mainly of iron, but also contains small amounts of nickel and other heavy elements. During the process of differentiation, heavy metals continued their journey to the center through the molten material, forming the basis for the structure of the Earth's core as we know it today. The inner core rotates faster than the surface of the planet, creating additional vortical movements in the liquid outer core, contributing to the formation of the magnetic field. This dynamics is studied by geophysicists using seismological methods, which allow them to investigate the internal layers of Earth. According to modern data, 80% of the inner core consists of iron and nickel, making it one of the densest objects on the planet. The Earth's mantle represents a massive layer between the core and the crust, occupying approximately 93% of the planet's volume. This layer is primarily composed of silicate minerals such as olivine and pyroxene and exists in a semi-liquid state, allowing for slow but powerful currents that transport heat from the planet's interior to the surface. The mantle's structure is formed under immense pressure, reaching over 1 million atmospheres in the lower regions, which results in extremely high temperatures, up to 3,000 degrees Celsius. It is in these conditions that the mantle forms a viscous consistency, resembling a vast ocean of molten rock. These tectonic movements occur at depths ranging from 30 to 200 kilometers and can create convective cells that function as giant pumps, transporting heat and influencing geological processes on the planet's surface. As a result, volcanoes, earthquakes, and even mountain ranges are formed. For instance, when hot flows rise, they can melt the crust, forming magma that is then expelled through volcanoes. This process is actively studied by geologists such as Professor James Hunter from the University of California, who uses convection models to understand the movement of the mantle and its impact on plate tectonics. The mantle also plays a crucial role in carbon cycles and other elemental cycles, which are vital for the Earth's climate system. Furthermore, the mantle's movements create conditions for the formation of the landscape we observe today, from flat plains to high mountains. In this context, the mantle is not merely a background for geological processes, but an active participant that determines the dynamics of the entire planet. The Earth's mantle is approximately 2,900 kilometers thick, making it one of the most significant layers of planetary structure. Approximately 4.5 billion years ago, a colossal collision between young Earth and a protoplanet the size of Mars, known as Theia, occurred. This event was one of the most significant in the history of our planet. The collision was so powerful that it ejected a vast amount of material from Earth's mantle and crust into space. Scientists estimate that the energy released in this catastrophic event was equivalent to billions of atomic bombs, resulting in the formation of a powerful cloud of molten rocks and gases that enveloped young Earth. This cloud, consisting of fragments and debris, began to rotate around the planet due to gravitational interaction with Earth. Over time, particles aggregated, forming larger bodies, which ultimately led to the formation of the Moon. Research indicates that the Moon formed from material originating from both Earth and Theia, explaining their similar chemical composition, including isotopes of oxygen that are nearly identical. The scale of this event cannot be overstated. It not only altered Earth's orbit, but also created conditions for the formation of the atmosphere and oceans, which became the foundation for the development of life. Additionally, data from missions such as Apollo show that the Moon has a diameter of 3,400 kilometers and is located at an average distance of 384,000 kilometers from Earth. This collision marked the beginning of a new era in Earth's history, forming its satellite, which continues to influence planetary processes such as tides, contributing to the evolution of life on our planet. The formation of the Moon occurred just a few tens of millions of years after Earth's formation, and this process was a crucial stage in its geological history. The Moon is not just a satellite of Earth, but a faithful companion that exerts a profound influence on numerous processes occurring on our planet. This massive celestial body, with a diameter of 3,400 kilometers, formed under conditions when Earth was just beginning to take shape. As a result of the gravitational interaction between Earth and the Moon, a system was created in which both bodies became interdependent. Since its formation, approximately 4.5 billion years ago, the Moon has maintained the stability of Earth's axial tilt, which in turn has contributed to the creation of diverse climatic conditions. Without this tilt, which currently amounts to about 23 degrees, our climate would be significantly less diverse, and the development of life on Earth could have unfolded quite differently. The Moon also influences the rhythms of life on our planet, setting the cycles of tides and ebbs, which, among other things, have contributed to the development of ecosystems in coastal zones. These tides are caused by the gravitational attraction of the Moon, which raises and lowers the level of the oceans. Various marine organisms have adapted to these cycles, forming the basis for entire ecosystems. For example, starfish and mollusks living in coastal zones depend on these daily changes in water level for their survival. Furthermore, the Moon can influence the behavior of animals that orient themselves by its phases. Birds, for instance, use its light for navigation during migrations. These interconnections permeate the entire biosphere, creating complex networks of interactions without which life on Earth would not be as we know it. It is important to note that the Moon not only influences physical processes, but also has cultural significance for humanity. For thousands of years, people have observed the Moon, and its cycles have formed the basis for the development of calendars. Ancient civilizations such as the Sumerians, Egyptians, and Mayans used lunar cycles to determine the time for sowing and harvesting. The Moon symbolizes constancy and cyclicity, which has found expression in the myths and legends of various peoples. In turn, this influence is reflected in art. Poets, artists, and composers have drawn inspiration from its image for centuries. Moreover, the Moon has been the subject of scientific research since the first space missions in the mid-20th century. The Apollo program, launched by NASA, resulted in 6 missions landing on its surface between 1969 and 1972, during which samples of lunar soil were collected and continue to be studied by scientists to this day. These samples have provided valuable information about the geological history of the Moon and its interaction with Earth. Furthermore, research on the Moon continues today, using modern technologies such as unmanned spacecraft. The Moon, as Earth's faithful companion, continues to be the subject of scientific and cultural research, remaining an important element in understanding our planet and its place in the cosmos. The presence of the Moon near Earth creates unique conditions without which our world would be completely different. The Moon exerts a significant influence on tides, which is due to its gravitational pull. This pull causes the Earth's oceans to rise, forming tidal waves that wash over coastlines twice a day. The Moon's greatest influence is felt where its gravitational pull is strongest, leading to the formation of high tides. On average, the water level rises by 1 meter, but in some places, such as bays and river estuaries, tides can reach heights of up to 6 meters. These constant water movements shape coastal lines, creating unique ecosystems in tidal zones where life has adapted to changing conditions. Various organisms, including mollusks, starfish, and different types of seaweed, have adapted to the regular changes in water level. Research indicates that in ancient times, when the Moon was closer to Earth, tides were much stronger than they are now. This is because the gravitational pull is inversely proportional to distance. The closer an object, the stronger its influence. The tides of those times created enormous tidal waves that swept over continents and washed their shores, shaping the landscape. Studies show that this effect significantly influenced geological processes, including erosion and sediment deposition. For example, in the region of the British Isles, where some of the highest tides in the world occur, tidal waves continue to shape the characteristic chalk cliffs of the area, which are the result of centuries of erosion. Over time, the ecosystems of tidal zones have adapted to these powerful influences. Organisms living in such conditions have developed unique survival mechanisms. For instance, some mollusks can close their shells to protect themselves from strong waves, while starfish can move across the surface to find food even during strong ebb tides. These adaptations make tidal zones some of the most productive marine ecosystems, where many species depend on regular tides and ebbs. In addition to its biological effects, the moon's influence on tides also has social implications. In ancient cultures, people used knowledge of tides for navigation and fishing. Coastal residents knew the best times to go to sea to catch fish based on tidal cycles. This knowledge was passed down through generations. In some traditional societies, there were even rituals associated with tides, where the moon played a key role in their culture and beliefs. Recent research shows that climate change can affect sea levels and, consequently, the strength of tides. As the climate warms, ocean levels rise, intensifying the impact of tidal waves on coastlines and increasing the risk of flooding and erosion. In some regions, such as the eastern coast of the United States, this has led to the need for building protective structures and developing new strategies for managing coastal areas. The moon, with its constant gravitational influence, continues to shape not only the physical environment, but also the cultural landscape of Earth. Its influence on tides and ebbs remains a subject of study for scientists worldwide, and these studies open new horizons in understanding both our past and future. Scientific data show that even small changes in the moon's orbit can lead to significant changes in tidal activity, underscoring its importance in Earth's ecosystems. The moon, located approximately 318,000 kilometers from Earth, plays a crucial role in stabilizing the Earth's axial tilt, which averages around 23.5 degrees. This influences seasonal climate changes on the planet and allows for the existence of diverse ecosystems. If the moon did not exist, the axial tilt could vary between 0 and 80 degrees, leading to catastrophic climate conditions. Such fluctuations in the Earth's rotation axis could result in an extremely cold or hot climate, making the development of complex life forms difficult. Evidence of this can be found in research conducted by astronomers such as Dr. David Bennett of NASA, who in 2005 demonstrated that the stability of the Earth's axis is ensured by the massive presence of the moon, which acts as an anchor, keeping the planet in balance. This effect, known as precession, occurs due to the moon's gravitational pull, which prevents chaotic oscillations of the axis. Given that Earth rotates around its axis with a period of approximately 24 hours, the predictability of this motion becomes possible thanks to the moon. Without its influence, climate changes could have led to unimaginable consequences, from sudden cooling to the extinction of species. For instance, throughout Earth's history, there were periods when the axial tilt significantly changed, and this was related to changes in the moon's orbit. Therefore, the moon is not just a satellite, but a key factor determining the climate conditions on Earth. Scientists suggest that without the constant presence of the moon, life on the planet could have evolved differently, and complex organisms like mammals might not have appeared at all. These data are supported by geological layer analysis, which shows that during periods when the moon was less stable, the climate on Earth was significantly more variable. There is a theory that if the moon disappeared, Earth could face a sudden increase in climate fluctuations, making existence on the planet extremely challenging. Research indicates that it is precisely due to the moon that Earth has sufficiently stable conditions for long-term life development, which is confirmed by the existence of life in various ecosystems. For example, in the tropics, A stable climate facilitated biodiversity development, while in temperate zones, the appearance of distinct seasons was necessary for many plant and animal species. Ultimately, the Moon's influence on Earth's climatic stability and its role in maintaining balance are undeniable and deserve further study. The cooling of early Earth was a complex process that can be compared to the cooling of a metal from which a solid object gradually forms. From the very beginning, when Earth first formed, it was in a state of complete liquefaction, with its surface covered in hot magma, much like a pot of boiling soup. As heat began to slowly dissipate into the cosmic space, the upper layers of this molten material began to solidify, creating the first solid crust of the planet. This process was similar to the formation of a thin film on the surface of hot soup as it cools. Initially, it forms only on the surface, but over time it covers a larger area. The interior of Earth remained hot and fluid, allowing magma to continue rising and creating new layers of crust. With each million years, as the surface temperature decreased, the crust became more solid and stable. This process was not uniform. In some places, cracks formed where magma could again erupt to the surface, creating volcanoes and new mountain ranges. As a result, continents and oceans began to form on the surface, providing conditions for future life. Similar to the formation of cracks and seams in a piece of metal, Earth also underwent changes that left their mark on its surface. These changes led to the formation of various geological structures, such as mountain ranges, valleys, and plains, which we can observe today. The cooling process depended on many factors, including the composition of the Earth's crust, the level of radiant heat, and the presence of water, which played a crucial role in chemical reactions. Therefore, the cooling of early Earth was not a simple and linear process, but a complex dance between internal and external forces that ultimately formed the planet we know today. One of the key moments in this process was the formation of the first continents, which began to rise from the depths of the oceans, creating new ecosystems. These continents were not just accumulations of land, but true laboratories for the future development of life. On this primary crust, conditions arose that were necessary for the formation of an atmosphere that could support life, and it was then that the process began, which ultimately led to the emergence of the first simple organisms. The formation of a solid crust of Earth became the basis for the development of complex systems that evolved over millions of years. It is important to note that it was precisely this cooling process that laid the foundation for such processes as plate tectonics, which continue to influence the appearance of our planet. The Earth's crust, composed of various minerals and rocks, became the home for future biosystems, and its composition continued to change under the influence of various factors such as erosion, volcanic activity, and precipitation. The formation of the first Earth's crust occurred approximately 30 million years after the planet's formation, as the surface temperature began to gradually decrease. On the molten ocean of magma, the first solid patches began to appear, thin crusts that were fragile and unstable. These crusts, formed from magma rocks, were far from the modern continents. They resembled islands floating on the surface of liquid rock, constantly colliding, breaking apart, and reforming. The initial crust lacked a solid structure and was subject to constant changes due to the planet's internal forces. Due to tectonic activity, which began almost immediately after its formation, these primary crustal sections were continually deformed, melting and solidifying again. As a result, islands of granite and other magma rocks would appear on the surface, often destroyed by volcanic activity. These processes occurred under constant thermal stress, with temperatures in the Earth's depths reaching thousands of degrees Celsius. Thus, the primary crust was extremely unstable. Its fragility and instability were evident in frequent earthquakes and volcanic eruptions that shattered it into pieces and forced new sections to rise to the surface. These crusts, formed from crystallized magma, could be only a few kilometers thick, which significantly differed from modern continents that can reach tens of kilometers in thickness. Over millions of years, these thin crusts gradually evolved, but their primordial fragility and variability remained a characteristic feature for a long time. Research shows that around 2.5 billion years ago, processes began that led to the formation of more stable continents. But the first islands of solid rock remained a living reminder of the chaos that reigned on early Earth. Ultimately, these primary crusts served as the basis for the subsequent formation of complex geological structures, but at that time, they were merely unstable and fragile formations floating on the molten magma. The early Earth's atmosphere was a thick, opaque shroud of toxic gases that enveloped the planet, creating conditions entirely unsuitable for life as we know it. Scientists believe that around 4 billion years ago, the atmosphere was dominated by carbon dioxide, water vapor, ammonia, and methane, with no free oxygen present. High temperatures, exceeding 200 degrees Celsius, led to constant volcanic eruptions that filled the air with poisonous vapors. Volcanoes release sulfur dioxide, giving the atmosphere a characteristic unpleasant odor and creating conditions lethal to modern forms of life. This atmosphere was a cocktail of toxic gases, with carbon dioxide concentrations reaching nearly 90%, making it extremely hostile to any living organisms. The sunlight we consider essential for life could not penetrate this dense gaseous shield, plunging the planet into eternal twilight. Scientists refer to this period as the Dark Ages of Earth, as the planet's surface remained hidden from the sun's light, and temperatures fluctuated between scorching and cold values, creating conditions fatal to any known biosphere. In such conditions, where there was no oxygen and only toxic gases surrounded the planet, life as we understand it was absolutely impossible. Scientific research indicates that such an atmosphere could have existed for millions of years until changes occurred, leading to the formation of the first simple organisms capable of photosynthesis, which began to produce oxygen and gradually transform the atmosphere. Thus, early Earth was a place where life was not just undesirable, but impossible, and its harsh conditions were merely a harbinger of future changes that ultimately led to the emergence of the diversity of life on our planet. During the process of degassing Earth, which took millions of years, gases trapped within the planet's interior were gradually released through volcanic eruptions and fractures in the crust. These gases were formed as a result of the decay of radionuclides and other processes occurring in the magma. Volcanoes, like giant lungs, exhaled these gases as magma rose to the surface, creating spectacular eruptions. For instance, the catastrophic eruption of Krakatoa in 1883 significantly altered the atmosphere, demonstrating how volcanic activity can influence climate and the environment. Eruptions release not only water vapor and carbon dioxide, but also sulfur gases, which, reacting with atmospheric oxygen, formed sulfuric acid, contributing to the formation of acid rain. These processes led to significant changes in the chemical composition of the atmosphere, making it more hospitable for life. Magmatic flows rising to the surface created fractures in the crust through which gases could escape unimpeded. This process was uneven, as different regions had varying degrees of volcanic activity. For example, in the Pacific Ring of Fire, where numerous active volcanoes are concentrated, this process occurred particularly actively. Each of these volcanoes, with its lava fountains and ash clouds, symbolized moments when Earth exhaled its internal gases, creating new conditions for the formation of the atmosphere. Gradually, as a result of this degassing, a gaseous envelope formed around Earth. This was not an instantaneous event, but a prolonged process during which gases mixed, changed, and created conditions necessary for the emergence of life. Volcanic islands like Hawaii arose from continuous eruptions that accumulated lava and formed new landmasses. The Hawaiian volcano Mauna Kea, one of the most active volcanoes on the planet, continues to release magma and gases, serving as a constant reminder that the degassing process is not complete. Over millions of years, volcanic activity created conditions that allowed the atmosphere to become rich in oxygen, essential for life. This process continued until significant changes occurred in the chemical composition of the atmosphere, which in turn affected the climate and ecosystems of the planet. As a result of degassing, gases such as nitrogen and oxygen began to dominate the atmosphere, providing conditions for the development of complex life forms. Gradually, Earth's atmosphere reached its current composition, but volcanic activity remains a crucial element in the planet's geological cycle, shaping not only landscapes, but also climatic conditions. As the planet cooled, the water vapor present in the atmosphere began to condense, forming clouds. This condensation process occurred over millions of years, starting approximately 4 billion years ago when the surface temperature of Earth significantly decreased. As a result of this continuous condensation, endless torrential rains began to fall, lasting for several 100,000 years. These rains, sometimes resembling powerful waterfalls flooding the surface, created vast flows of water that rapidly filled the lowlands and depressions on Earth. Water falling from the sky formed the first small bodies of water, which gradually merged to create larger lakes and seas. As the volume of water increased, these bodies of water expanded, and the first oceans began to form due to long and intense atmospheric processes. This was not just ordinary rain, it was a true cataclysm lasting millions of years, during which water poured endlessly from the sky, creating a primordial environment that became the foundation for future life on the planet. By the end of this period, around 3 billion years ago, oceans covered a significant portion of the Earth's surface, with their waters covering approximately 70% of the planet. These oceans were not just vast expanses of water, but also the place where life began. Single-celled organisms, such as cyanobacteria, began to actively reproduce in these nutrient-rich waters, producing oxygen that became the basis for the atmosphere we know today. By this time, erosion processes were actively underway on Earth, with rainwater flows eroding rock formations and transporting sediments into the oceans, forming sedimentary layers. The first deep-sea trenches and continental shelves began to appear, creating a unique underwater landscape. Thus, the formation of the first oceans was a crucial stage in the evolution of our planet, providing conditions for the development of complex ecosystems and diverse forms of life. With each million years, the oceans became more extensive, their waters carrying not only minerals, but also organic matter, contributing to the further development of life. When the first multicellular organisms appeared on Earth, the oceans already represented a complex and dynamic ecosystem teeming with diversity. The early ocean of Earth, which emerged approximately 4 billion years ago, was a unique and astonishing environment. This primitive ocean was rich in minerals and organic compounds washed out from magma rocks and brought in by meteorites, creating a special chemical environment. The main components of the water were hydrogen, oxygen, and various ions, such as sodium, chlorine, calcium, and magnesium, which dissolved in the hot water. The temperature of the ocean at that time fluctuated between 60 and 120 degrees Celsius, making it hotter than modern oceans. The high temperature accelerated the speed of chemical reactions, turning the ocean into a giant laboratory where countless interactions of various compounds took place. The water's acidity was significantly higher than in modern seas, creating conditions for the dissolution of minerals and the formation of new chemical compounds. In such conditions, simple organic molecules that preceded life could form. It is also worth noting that the ocean was rich in metallic elements such as iron, copper, and zinc, which, in combination with high acidity, created unique conditions for the emergence of the first biochemical processes. The color of this ancient ocean differed from the familiar blue, being rather greenish or brownish due to the large number of suspended particles and minerals, and the smell was sharp and metallic, sharply contrasting with the clean aroma of modern seas. The consistency of the water was more viscous, caused by the high content of organic substances and minerals, giving it a murky appearance. This special environment facilitated the formation of the first primitive organisms, which could use the available elements for their existence. It is important to note that this ocean was not just a water surface, but a real chemical field where life began, and it was here that the first experiments of nature took place, which later led to the emergence of biodiversity of living organisms. Nevertheless, this environment was extremely hostile to more complex forms of life that appeared later. Over billions of years, the ocean continued to change, its chemical composition evolving to adapt to new conditions on the planet. Scientific research shows that the composition of early oceans differed significantly from modern seas, and this difference played a key role in the formation of Earth's ecosystems. In the ancient oceans of Earth, there existed a unique complex of substances that scientists refer to as the primary broth. Imagine a thick, rich mixture in which molecules were ready to combine into more complex structures capable of giving rise to life. This broth consisted of various organic compounds that formed as a result of chemical reactions occurring under conditions far removed from today's. The temperature on the ocean surface could fluctuate from very low to high values, creating ideal conditions for the formation of new chemical compounds. It was as if in a vast laboratory where all elements were present, but without human intervention, nature itself created conditions for evolution. Energy, arriving in the form of lightning, played a key role in these processes. Lightning striking the ocean's surface could trigger powerful chemical reactions that led to the formation of complex organic molecules. Ultraviolet radiation penetrating the atmosphere also contributed to these reactions, adding more energy to this nourishing soup. Hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor, spewing hot water and minerals, served not only as a source of heat, but also as a place where unique chemical reactions could occur. These vents, rich in minerals, provided the necessary components for the synthesis of organic molecules that later became the foundations for the first living organisms. Research indicates that such conditions could have existed on Earth approximately 3.5 billion years ago, when the first signs of life began to appear. The concept of the primary broth highlights how many factors, including chemical components and natural sources of energy, played a decisive role in the origin of life on our planet. Primary living organisms, such as simple forms, could have emerged from this mixture, which nourished and shaped them. The nourishing broth, like a vast cauldron, revealed its secrets, providing humanity with a key to understanding its origins. Ultimately, it was this interplay of various elements and sources of energy that led to the appearance of the first simple forms of life, which became the basis for all life on Earth. Hydrothermal sources on the floor of an ancient ocean represent unique ecosystems where hot, mineral-rich water is ejected from cracks in the ocean floor. These underwater oases are primarily located on the borders of tectonic plates, where volcanic activity occurs. One of the most famous areas with such sources is the Black Smokers region on the eastern Pacific Rise, discovered in 1983 by an expedition led by Robert Ballard. From these smokers, jets of hot water are released, with temperatures that can reach 300 degrees Celsius, creating a contrast with the cold waters of the ocean, which typically hover around 0 degrees Celsius. Water rising from the depths is rich in various minerals such as sulfur, copper, and iron, leading to the formation of exotic mineral deposits such as icicles and towers formed around the hot water outlets. These sources create a unique chemical environment where high temperatures and concentrations of various substances promote the formation of gradients necessary for life. In such conditions, extremophile organisms capable of surviving in aggressive environments, including methanogenic archaea and thermophilic bacteria, thrive. These organisms use chemical reactions to obtain energy. Scientists believe that places like these could have been the cradle of Earth's life, as they provided the necessary conditions for the formation of the first simple organisms. Data on microbial ecosystems existing around hydrothermal sources demonstrate how life can flourish in conditions that seem completely inhospitable to most known forms of life on the planet. For example, a study conducted in 1995 at a depth of about 2,500 meters revealed unique communities of worms, mollusks, and other organisms that feed on symbiotic bacteria living on the basis of hydrogen sulfide emitted from these sources. These organisms form complex food chains that can exist independently of sunlight, challenging traditional notions that life requires solar energy. Scientific research continues to uncover new species and ecosystems in these underwater oases, underscoring their importance for understanding not only the origin of life on Earth, but also the possibility of life on other planets. In particular, missions to Europa, a moon of Jupiter, and Enceladus, a moon of Saturn, focus on subsurface oceans that may contain similar hydrothermal sources. These studies highlight that places like Black Smokers are not just interesting objects of study, but are key to understanding the earliest stages of life on our planet. It is worth noting that such sources remain an active area of research, and each new expedition can bring unexpected discoveries in the fields of biology and geology, expanding our understanding of the possibilities for life in extreme conditions. The process of forming the first organic molecules in the ocean can be envisioned as a long and complex path, on which simple molecules gradually transformed into more complex structures capable of interacting with each other. It all began around 4 billion years ago, when the primary ocean contained simple gaseous molecules: hydrogen, methane, ammonia, and water vapor. These gases dissolved in water, creating a chemically active environment. Scientists like Stanley Miller and Eugene Ornstein demonstrated in their experiments in the mid-20th century that under certain conditions, such as electrical discharges, it is possible to stimulate the formation of organic compounds from simple molecules. In their famous experiment conducted in 1953, they obtained amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. During the reaction, more complex molecules, such as carbohydrates and lipids, began to exhibit self-organization properties. These molecules, with a certain degree of stability, began to combine into larger structures, forming primitive protocells. Research shows that under conditions similar to the ancient Earth's atmosphere, some molecules formed micelles and liposomes, which represented the first steps towards the formation of cellular membranes. These membranes provided isolation of the internal environment, allowing molecules to interact more effectively. This process of self-assembly was crucial, as it facilitated the formation of the first protocells. Protocells, consisting of lipid membranes and organic molecules, could exchange substances and even carry out simple metabolic processes, which became the foundation for further evolution of life. Scientists suggest that, as a result of these processes occurring in oceanic waters, the first RNA molecules emerged, which could self-replicate, marking one of the most important stages in the transition from non-living matter to living organisms. It is important to note that similar processes did not occur only in oceans, but also in other ecosystems, such as hot springs and underwater volcanoes, where rich chemistry could contribute to the formation of complex organic molecules. Experiments show that in similar conditions on other planets, such as Titan, Saturn's moon, organic molecules can also form, raising questions about the possibility of life beyond Earth. Modern research continues to delve deeper into understanding these initial stages, opening new horizons in the study of the origin of life. As a result, the science of the origin of life gains new facts and confirmations, making each new discovery particularly significant. Self-replicating molecules represent an extraordinary phenomenon where certain chemical structures acquire the ability to create their own copies using materials available in the surrounding environment. This process resembles seeds that, once planted in fertile soil, begin to sprout and develop. In this context, self-replicating molecules can be seen as the first seeds of life, which, arising in conditions conducive to chemical evolution, become the foundation for the further development of biological systems. For instance, in these molecules, energy and resources are used to make copies of themselves, opening new horizons in understanding how life might have originated on Earth. Moreover, this process of self-replication is not random. It is subject to natural selection, where more efficient molecules have a better chance of survival and further reproduction. Studies conducted in laboratory conditions show that such molecules can form from simple organic compounds, emphasizing the importance of the conditions in which they arise. In particular, in systems like primitive protocells or microscopic droplets, one can observe how molecules interact with each other, forming more complex structures. These molecules can adapt to changes in their environment, making them more resilient to external influences. The appearance of self-replicating structures marked a critical transition from chemical evolution to biological evolution, as it was at this point that molecules began not just to exist, but also to actively influence their surroundings, contributing to the further development of complex life. This process, which may have occurred billions of years ago, laid the foundation for all known forms of life on Earth, from simple bacteria to complex organisms like humans. Research conducted by scientists such as Stanley Miller in the mid-20th century shows that in conditions mimicking ancient Earth, organic molecules similar to those that could have become the basis for self-replicating structures can be created. As a result, these molecules are not merely chemical combinations. They represent a significant step in evolution, as they open doors to more complex forms of life, challenging the traditional understanding of how life began on our planet. In essence, self-replicating molecules create conditions for the emergence of new forms of life, which in turn can evolve and adapt to changing conditions on Earth. Scientific works, such as those on abiogenesis, are aimed at understanding these processes, highlighting that self-replicating molecules are key players in this complex game where chemistry meets biology. The formation of the first cellular membranes was a pivotal stage in the evolution of living organisms. Approximately 3 billion years ago, on the early Earth, certain molecules, such as phospholipids, began to naturally aggregate into thin films, creating primitive structures that we can imagine as tiny bubbles. These bubbles, with diameters of just a few micrometers, possessed a unique ability to separate their internal contents from the surrounding environment. This self-assembly process was driven by the hydrophobic properties of phospholipids. Their long hydrocarbon chains sought to avoid water, forming bilayer membranes, while their hydrophilic heads faced outward. These membranes did not merely protect the nascent processes of life from external influences. They provided ideal conditions for concentrating chemical reactions in a confined space. This accelerated evolutionary processes, allowing molecules to interact more effectively and frequently. It is important to note that such membranes could grow, divide, and fuse with other bubbles, creating increasingly complex structures. This process of membrane fusion could lead to the formation of larger and more complex cells, opening new horizons for future evolution. Research conducted in the 20th century demonstrated that such membrane structures could be reproduced in laboratory conditions. For example, in 2006, scientists at the University of California, San Diego, created synthetic membranes that could self-assemble and divide, thus confirming the hypothesis that membranes were precursors to cells. These experiments showed that a simple chemical reaction could initiate complex processes leading to the formation of living organisms. Over time, these primitive membranes evolved, developing functions such as molecular transport and metabolic exchange. This meant that life could adapt to various environmental conditions and changes in chemical composition. For instance, some membranes began to contain proteins that acted as channels, allowing certain substances to pass into or out of the cell. This laid the foundation for the emergence of multicellular organisms and, ultimately, complex ecosystems. Modern research continues to delve deeper into understanding these processes. For example, in 2020, scientists at the University of Texas at Austin discovered that lipid membranes could form structures similar to cellular organelles, indicating their potential role in the development of cellular organization. This progress confirms that membranes are not just protective shells, but active participants in the formation of life, allowing the concentration of chemical reactions and accelerating evolutionary changes. In conclusion, the formation of the first cellular membranes marked the beginning of complex and diverse life on Earth. First prokaryotic cells, which appeared over 3.5 billion years ago, formed the basis of all life on Earth. These single-celled organisms, whose age determines the age of our planet, were microscopic, with sizes ranging from 1 to 10 micrometers. Unlike more complex eukaryotic cells, prokaryotes did not have a nucleus or complex organelles. Their genetic material consisted of a circular DNA molecule located in the cytoplasm and freely floating within the cell. This simple structure allowed prokaryotes to quickly adapt to changes in their environment. These ancient organisms fed through processes of osmosis and diffusion, as molecules of nutrients penetrated through the cell membrane. For example, cyanobacteria, one of the first groups of prokaryotes, used photosynthesis to convert solar energy into chemical energy, releasing oxygen in the process. In the harsh and diverse early Earth environment, prokaryotes demonstrated remarkable resilience. They could survive in hot springs, acidic waters, and even in conditions of high salt concentrations. These organisms became the primary producers of oxygen, which over time altered the composition of Earth's atmosphere. Reproduction occurred asexually through cell division, allowing them to quickly colonize new territories. For instance, a single prokaryotic cell could transform into millions in just a few hours. Their ability to exchange genetic material, known as horizontal gene transfer, ensured rapid evolution and adaptation to new conditions. These simplest organisms not only laid the foundations for further life development, but also demonstrated how science gradually reveals the mysteries of our past. The existence of such simple yet incredibly resilient organisms as prokaryotes has been key to understanding evolutionary processes that led to the emergence of more complex life forms. Prokaryotes, such as bacteria and archaea, still make up the majority of the planet's biomass, underscoring their importance in ecosystems. Such organisms continue to successfully survive in extreme conditions where other forms of life could not, including deep-sea mines and hot springs at the bottom of the oceans. Prokaryotes, with their remarkable adaptive mechanisms, remain a living testament to the power of life capable of surviving in the most adverse conditions. Stromatolites are among the oldest evidence of life on Earth, formed by layered structures created by colonies of microorganisms, primarily cyanobacteria. These microscopic organisms, with their ability to photosynthesize, began capturing sedimentary particles, forming mat layers that gradually grew, creating characteristic domes and columns. Each layer of stromatolite can be visualized as an annual ring of a tree, reflecting the passage of time. The slower the stromatolite grew, the more distinct its layers became. Throughout their life, cyanobacteria released oxygen, which in turn altered the chemical composition of the atmosphere and oceans, leading to significant changes in ecosystems. Stromatolites grow extremely slowly, with their increase often measuring only a few millimeters per year, making them true archives of geological history. These structures can reach significant sizes, sometimes exceeding several meters in height, and their form and texture can vary depending on the conditions of the surrounding environment, from calm waters to turbulent. Stromatolites can be considered as a kind of biomarker, allowing scientists to study changes in climate and ecosystems over millions of years. Researchers like Dr. Robert Decker have studied stromatolites and concluded that their study allows us to understand how life on Earth adapted to changing conditions. These ancient structures are uniquely valuable in paleontology, as they contain traces of life that allow us to reconstruct ancient ecosystems and climatic conditions. Stromatolites are not only an important element of our planet, but also demonstrate how life in its earliest forms could alter its surroundings, creating conditions for the emergence of more complex forms of life. Scientific research shows that stromatolites, being living organisms, continue to exist in contemporary ecosystems, confirming their continuous evolution over billions of years. Stromatolites are not only an interesting object of study, but also a symbol of the resilience of life in conditions that seem inhospitable to most organisms. Shark Bay in Australia, located on the coast of Western Australia, is home to unique stromatolites, which are colonies of cyanobacteria that form structures identical to those that existed billions of years ago. This bay, inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2000, is renowned for its highly saline waters, which provide ideal conditions for the survival of these ancient microorganisms. Stromatolites in Shark Bay grow very slowly, adding only 1 to 3 millimeters per year on average, making them some of the slowest growing organisms on the planet. These rounded domes and columns, which can reach several meters in height, create a stunning underwater landscape reminiscent of Earth's distant past. In the clear waters of the bay, sunlight penetrates the water's surface and illuminates these ancient structures, giving them a nearly mystical appearance. Stromatolites form layers in which various minerals, including carbonates, have accumulated over billions of years, allowing scientists to study the geological history of our planet and the changes in climatic conditions. In this unique ecosystem, living stromatolites serve not only as living fossils, but also as indicators of the health of the surrounding environment, as their health is directly dependent on the quality of the water and the level of salinity. Scientists such as Dr. Ian Cameron, who studies stromatolites in Shark Bay, emphasize the importance of these organisms for understanding the evolutionary processes that occurred on Earth. Each stromatolite is a living page in the book of our planet's history, allowing us to look back to a distant past when life was first beginning to form in the water. These bacterial colonies, which have maintained their form and structure for billions of years, demonstrate how life can adapt and survive in conditions that might seem inhospitable. With each passing year, as researchers study stromatolites, they uncover new aspects of biology and ecology, making Shark Bay not only a natural, but also a scientific treasure. Photosynthesis is a process that brought about a true revolution in biology and ecology on our planet, enabling living beings to convert solar energy into chemical energy, making the existence of life in various forms possible. This unique process began approximately 2.5 billion years ago, when the simplest organisms first learned to use sunlight to create organic compounds from inorganic substances. When sunlight hits the surface of leaves, it initiates a chain of reactions that transforms carbon dioxide and water into sugars and oxygen. It is the oxygen released into the atmosphere during photosynthesis that became a catalyst for the emergence of more complex forms of life, including animals and ultimately humans. Without this remarkable transformation, the world would look entirely different. The atmosphere would be rich in carbon dioxide, and life on Earth might be limited to the simplest forms. Photosynthesis not only creates food for plants, but also serves as the foundation for the entire food chain, on which all living organisms depend. As a result of this process, the Earth's atmosphere became oxygen-rich, opening the way for the evolution of multicellular organisms. This shift in atmospheric chemistry was one of the greatest evolutionary breakthroughs, opening new horizons for life. Sunlight, which for billions of years was simply a source of heat, became the primary driver of biochemical processes, enabling the development of complex ecosystems. Photosynthesis, in essence, is nature's cooking, where sunlight is used to prepare food from simple ingredients, and the result of this dish is not only the life of plants, but also the life of animals, including humans. For example, green plants can produce up to 200 billion tons of organic matter per year, which constitutes a significant portion of the entire biomass on the planet. This process became the basis for the appearance of forests, fields, and oceans teeming with life, as we know them today. Photosynthesis not only changed the atmosphere, but also became the foundation for complex ecosystems where millions of species interact. The intricate networks of life support, formed thanks to photosynthesis, ensure the existence of both simple organisms and higher animals. Without this process, the existence on Earth as we know it would be impossible. It is important to note that it is photosynthesis that allows us to breathe, as it releases oxygen, which is necessary for the life of most organisms on the planet. This process, consisting of many stages, not only creates nutrients, but also contributes to maintaining the balance in ecosystems, making it one of the cornerstones of life on Earth. Photosynthesis produced so much oxygen that it changed the chemical composition of the atmosphere, leading to the formation of the ozone layer, which protects us from harmful ultraviolet rays. As a result of photosynthesis, conditions necessary for the existence of life as we know it appeared on Earth. Cyanobacteria are some of the oldest photosynthesizing organisms on Earth, appearing more than 3 billion years ago. These microorganisms, also known as blue-green algae, possess a unique ability to use solar energy to synthesize organic compounds, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. The sizes of cyanobacteria range from 1 to several micrometers, but in the vast shallow waters of ancient oceans, they formed extensive colonies, coloring the waters in shades of blue-green, visible even from space. Over millions of years, cyanobacteria filled the atmosphere with oxygen, marking one of the most significant evolutionary milestones in the history of our planet. During photosynthesis, cyanobacteria absorbed carbon dioxide and released oxygen, altering the chemical composition of the atmosphere and creating conditions for the emergence of more complex life forms. For instance, around 2 billion years ago, a period known as the oxygen crisis occurred when the oxygen level in the atmosphere reached a critical point, leading to massive changes in ecosystems and the evolution of many organisms. Scientists like Professor Daniel Bennett from the University of California have studied the genomes of cyanobacteria and discovered that they possess an extraordinary diversity of genes involved in photosynthesis and adaptation to various environmental conditions. These microorganisms can survive in the most extreme conditions, from hot springs to frozen Arctic waters, demonstrating their incredible resilience and versatility. The ability of cyanobacteria to form colonies led to the formation of structures called stromatolites, layers composed of accumulated remains of these organisms, which can be found in geological deposits and serve as important indicators of ancient life. Research shows that stromatolites have existed for at least 3.5 billion years, and some continue to form today, for example, in Australian bays. Through their photosynthetic activity, cyanobacteria not only altered the atmosphere, but also contributed to the formation of the first ecosystems, anchoring life on land. These tiny creatures became the foundation for the development of oxygen-based ecosystems and, ultimately, for the emergence of animals and humans. Scientific research shows that cyanobacteria can also be used in modern technologies, such as bioremediation and biofuel production, underscoring their importance not only in the past, but also in the future. The oxygen they continue to release makes up approximately 21% of our atmosphere, and without their primary contribution, life on the planet might have evolved very differently. The oxygen catastrophe is one of the most dramatic events in the history of our planet, which fundamentally altered the composition of the atmosphere and oceans. As oxygen, produced by cyanobacteria, accumulated in the atmosphere, there was a sharp increase in its concentration, making it a deadly poison for most organisms that inhabited Earth at the time. Previous forms of life, such as anaerobic bacteria, evolved in conditions where oxygen was virtually non-existent and lacked mechanisms to protect against this lethal substance. For them, oxygen, which is now a necessary element for the respiration of most living beings, became a mortal threat. This paradox is astonishing. A gas that supports life became the cause of mass extinctions. The situation was further exacerbated by the fact that oxygen not only poisoned organisms, but also oxidized chemical compounds, leading to the destruction of ecosystems dominated by anaerobic organisms. The discovery that oxygen can act as an oxidizer changed the chemical dynamics of the planet. As a result of this process, many species went extinct, giving way to other life forms that adapted to the new conditions. The emergence of aerobic organisms capable of using oxygen to produce energy marked a new stage in evolution. These organisms began to develop in the oceans, where oxygen gradually dissolved, creating conditions for the formation of more complex ecosystems. The oxygen catastrophe not only led to extinction, but also paved the way for new forms of life, including multicellular organisms, which subsequently populated the oceans and land. This event also laid the foundation for the formation of the ozone layer, which protected life from harmful ultraviolet radiation, allowing plants and animals to develop in new conditions. The oxidation of iron in the oceans led to the formation of sedimentary rocks, such as iron-rich conglomerates, which still serve as evidence of those dramatic changes. The oxygen catastrophe also marked the beginning of a new era that eventually led to the appearance of complex ecosystems, and, ultimately, to the emergence of humans. This transitional moment in the history of the planet became a cornerstone for the formation of the biosphere as we know it today. Abnormally high levels of oxygen, achieved as a result of photosynthetic activity, created conditions conducive to further evolution of life. Oxidation of iron in the oceans during the oxygen catastrophe became a significant process that not only altered the composition of seawater, but also the appearance of the oceans. Over approximately 200 million years, starting around 2.5 billion years ago, the photosynthetic activity of organisms such as cyanobacteria led to the release of enormous volumes of oxygen into the atmosphere and oceans. This oxygen, when dissolved in seawater, reacted with dissolved iron, which had previously existed as divalent ions. As a result of this reaction, trivalent iron oxides such as hematite and magnetite were formed, which gradually precipitated as sediment. These sediments, forming banded iron formations known as iron formations, became a distinctive feature of the geological layers of that time. These unique layers, consisting of red-banded deposits, serve as evidence of how the chemical composition of seas changed and are important indicators of the oxygen catastrophe. Research shows that such formations can reach thicknesses of up to 100 meters and were formed through multiple cycles of oxidation and precipitation. As the concentration of oxygen in water increased and interacted with iron, the color of the oceans changed. From the greenish or grayish hue characteristic of hypoxic conditions to the pure blue we see today. This change in color is due to the iron oxides that formed precipitating as sediment, clearing the water of suspended particles and allowing sunlight to penetrate deeper. As a result, the marine ecosystem evolved, creating conditions for the emergence of more complex forms of life. With the appearance of these banded iron formations, scientists were able to accurately date this period, which helped better understand the evolution of the surrounding environment. By the time the oxygen catastrophe reached its peak, extensive areas of sedimentary rocks containing iron minerals were formed, which today serve not only as geological evidence, but also as important resources for industry. The degree of iron oxidation in the oceans led to the formation of large iron ore deposits, such as the famous reserves in Canada and Brazil, which began to be actively developed in the 20th century. The oxygen catastrophe not only altered the chemical composition of the atmosphere, but also drove an extraordinary adaptation in the organisms inhabiting Earth. As the oxygen level in the atmosphere began to rise sharply, some organisms developed protective mechanisms to survive in conditions where oxygen became toxic. For instance, certain bacteria, such as Clostridium, evolved anaerobic metabolic pathways, enabling them to avoid the harmful effects of oxygen. Meanwhile, other organisms, like cyanobacteria, began to use oxygen in their photosynthetic processes, opening new horizons for metabolism. These organisms released oxygen into the atmosphere, laying the foundation for the formation of more complex ecosystems. Gradually, this process led to the emergence of multicellular organisms, such as algae, which began to actively use oxygen for more efficient metabolism. For example, around 600 million years ago, during the Ediacaran biota period, the first complex organisms, such as Dickinsonia, appeared, reaching lengths of up to 1 meter and capable of breathing oxygen. This was a true revolution in the world of living beings, as oxygen became the catalyst for the emergence of new forms of life. Simple single-celled organisms were replaced by more complex multicellular structures that required more energy for their existence. At this time, on Earth, ecosystems began to form, where organisms capable of active movement and hunting, such as trilobites, already existed. Around 500 million years ago, during the Cambrian period, there was what is known as the Cambrian explosion, when the diversity of marine organisms suddenly increased. These adaptations to the oxygen atmosphere allowed many organisms not only to survive, but also to thrive, paving the way for the development of more complex and energy-efficient forms of life, which later led to the appearance of vertebrates, including the first fish, and ultimately, mammals. This adaptive radiation became the basis for the emergence of all modern forms of life on Earth. The primary significance of oxygen as an element that promotes life became evident when it was discovered that the oxygen level in the atmosphere reached approximately 21%, which is optimal for the respiration of many living organisms. An eukaryotic cell is a significantly more complex structure than prokaryotes, and can be visualized as a miniature city with clearly organized districts and specialized factories, each performing a unique function. This type of cell, which first appeared around 2 billion years ago, became the foundation for all multicellular organisms, including plants, fungi, and animals. Inside these cells lies a nucleus, which can be compared to the administrative center of a city, where genetic material is stored in the form of DNA. Unlike prokaryotes, in eukaryotes, DNA is organized into chromosomes, which ensures more efficient management of hereditary information. The nucleus is surrounded by a nuclear membrane, which protects this vital organ from external influences, much like a city's fortress wall. Internal structures, or organelles, function like factories and offices, performing various tasks such as energy production, protein synthesis, and waste processing. For example, mitochondria can be compared to power plants, generating the energy needed for cellular life. The emergence of eukaryotes was a true revolutionary leap in the complexity of living systems, as these cells allowed organisms to adapt and evolve into more complex forms of life. Eukaryotes can form multicellular organisms, interact with each other, and specialize in various functions, leading to the formation of complex ecosystems. This level of organization and specialization became possible due to the internal mechanisms of cells, which ensure effective interaction and coordination, much like how city services work together to ensure the normal functioning of a city. Eukaryotes not only laid the foundation for multicellular organisms, but also became a significant step in the evolution of life on Earth, opening the way for the emergence of complex ecosystems such as forests, oceans, and even human society. Such cells not only survive in their environment, but also actively modify it by interacting with other forms of life, leading to the continuous development and change of the biosphere. This complex network of interactions and interdependencies demonstrates how eukaryotes became key players in the history of life on the planet. Examples of such complex interactions can be observed in symbiotic relationships, where different organisms, such as fungi and plants, work together to exchange nutrients and energy, creating stable ecosystems. The complexity of eukaryotic cells and their ability to organize led to the emergence of higher forms of life, which in turn opens new horizons for research and understanding of biology. The combination of cells into multicellular organisms allowed the development of specialized tissues and organs, which became the basis for the formation of various biological systems. Eukaryotes continue to evolve, and their diversity of forms and functions is a true testament to the strength and flexibility of life on Earth. The theory of endosymbiosis explains the origin of mitochondria as the result of a complex interaction between ancient bacteria and the precursors of eukaryotic cells. Approximately 2 billion years ago, larger cells that were unable to efficiently use oxygen engulfed aerobic bacteria capable of obtaining energy in the presence of oxygen. Instead of digesting these bacteria, the cells incorporated them into their internal structures, creating a unique symbiotic union. This event can be seen as an extraordinary alliance where one cell, like a predator, decides not to destroy its prey, but to use it to enhance its own efficiency. As a result of this interaction, mitochondria emerged, becoming the energy stations of cells and providing them with the necessary energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate, ATP. This process was crucial for evolution, as it allowed cells to use oxygen for energy production, opening new horizons for growth and development. Mitochondria, which retained their own circular DNA, resembling the genetic material of bacteria, serve as evidence of their bacterial origin and independent existence before symbiosis. The structures of mitochondria, containing their own ribosomes, can synthesize some proteins necessary for their function, confirming their autonomy. This remarkable symbiosis became the foundation for the appearance of more complex forms of life, leading to the diversity of organisms that we observe today. Scientific research conducted, for example, in the 20th century, confirmed the hypothesis that mitochondria share many characteristics with modern alpha proteobacteria, such as Rickettsia, which are also intracellular parasites. Comparative analysis of the genomes of mitochondria and these bacteria shows striking similarity, confirming that mitochondria are descendants of these ancient cells. The structure formed as a result of endosymbiosis allowed cells to become more efficient, giving them a competitive advantage. This process not only altered cellular biology, but also paved the way for the appearance of multicellular organisms that use oxygen for respiration. Thus, mitochondria, which became an integral part of cells, continue to perform their functions, enabling living beings to adapt and develop in diverse conditions. Mitochondria are key elements in the process of cellular respiration, providing the energy necessary for all life processes. During the course of evolution, another crucial symbiotic relationship occurred that altered the appearance of life on Earth: the emergence of chloroplasts. Approximately 2 billion years ago, during a period known as the oxygen catastrophe, some eukaryotic cells engulfed photosynthesizing cyanobacteria. This process of engulfment, known as endosymbiosis, marked the beginning of a new phase in biological evolution. The cyanobacteria, which already knew how to use light for the synthesis of organic compounds, became internal solar batteries for their hosts. As a result of this interaction, eukaryotic cells gain the ability to directly use solar energy for photosynthesis, fundamentally changing their metabolism. This process allowed cells to produce not only their own food, but also release oxygen into the atmosphere, altering its composition and creating conditions for the development of life as we know it. The endosymbiotic cyanobacteria evolved into chloroplasts, becoming an integral part of plants. This transition occurred around the same time that the first multicellular organisms began to form on Earth. It is important to note that it was precisely due to symbiosis with cyanobacteria that algae appeared, which became the primary producers of oxygen in the oceans. Algae such as chlorella and spirulina are direct descendants of these ancient photosynthesizers. Modern plants, from moss to oak, have chloroplasts in their cells that continue to perform the same function as they did billions of years ago. They absorb solar light and convert it into chemical energy, supporting life on our planet. This event laid the foundation for the formation of ecosystems, on which all life is built, from the simplest organisms to complex ecosystems of forests and oceans. Chloroplasts not only provide photosynthetic activity, but also play a crucial role in the carbon cycle, binding carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen, which is critically important for the respiration of all aerobic organisms. Every day on Earth, the process of photosynthesis occurs, providing around 30% of the energy needed for life. This process allows plants, algae, and even cyanobacteria to grow and develop, forming ecosystems in which we live. Multicellularity represents one of the most significant stages in the development of life on Earth, occurring approximately 1 billion years ago when single cells began to form colonies and later evolved into organisms with differentiated tissues. This transition can be compared to human society. Individual cells, like individuals, give up their autonomy to create something greater and more complex. Initially, in simple colonies, cells retained a certain degree of individuality, but over time, they began to specialize in performing various functions. For example, some cells could become responsible for nutrition, while others focused on protection. This is similar to how people in human society choose professions and roles to maximize the use of their abilities and resources. Cell specialization allows the organism to perform more complex tasks and adapt to changes in the environment. For instance, multicellular organisms can develop different types of tissues: muscle for movement, nerve for signal transmission, and epithelial for protection and metabolism. This approach significantly increases the chances of survival and successful reproduction. By uniting, cells create protective barriers that help them resist hostile conditions, such as infections or physical damage. Moreover, multicellular organisms can effectively use resources like nutrients and oxygen due to a complex system of organs and tissues that work together like a well-oiled machine. The process of cell differentiation, which laid the foundation for multicellularity, can be considered one of the cornerstones of biology, as it opened new horizons in understanding life. The ability of cells to collaborate and form complex structures allows multicellular organisms to reach sizes and functional capabilities that are not accessible to their single-celled predecessors. An example of this is the development of multicellular organisms like algae, which have been able to occupy diverse ecological niches thanks to their specialized cells. Since the appearance of the first multicellular organisms, such as simple metazoans, about 600 million years ago, life on Earth has undergone fundamental changes, leading to the emergence of complex ecosystems where various forms of life interact. The application of multicellularity at the level of individual cells created conditions for the emergence of complex organisms that can develop, adapt, and survive in various environments. The system of multicellularity, in which each cell performs a unique role, is the basis for the formation of complex ecosystems and the biosphere as a whole. The Ediacaran biota, which existed around 600 million years ago, represents a mysterious and unique stage in the history of life on Earth. These primitive multicellular organisms inhabited ancient oceans and possessed forms that are astonishing. Their soft, boneless bodies often resembled discs, feathers, or quilted mats with embroidered patterns, creating images that are difficult to compare with modern animals. Some of them had the shape of flat discs up to 1 meter in diameter, while others looked like triangular or oval structures sprawled on the seabed. Such creatures as Dickinsonia could reach lengths of more than 1 meter and were characterized by a symmetrical structure that resembled a peculiar downy pattern, giving the impression that they were part of the marine background. Studies have shown that these organisms did not have a hard skeleton, making them vulnerable to environmental conditions. Ediacarans led a slow-paced life, crawling along the seafloor or simply lying on it, absorbing nutrients from water and sediments. Their metabolism was likely based on diffusion, allowing them to extract necessary elements from the environment without active hunting or movement. A complex metabolic process enabled them to survive in conditions where resource competition was not yet as intense. However, the enigma of these creatures lies in the fact that many of them are difficult to classify into known groups of organisms. For example, some forms, such as Sprigina, exhibit features that can be considered precursors to modern animals, but their exact position in the evolutionary tree remains unclear. The Ediacaran biota demonstrates how life on Earth could take the most diverse forms, and how these forms left traces in the geological record that continue to spark debate among scientists. A significant number of finds, such as fossilized tracks, indicate that these organisms inhabited oceans during the Proterozoic era, when the atmosphere was not yet saturated with oxygen, limiting the possibilities for the development of more complex forms of life. Discoveries at places like Ediacara in Australia and Nunavut in Canada have allowed scientists to study these ancient creatures and understand how they could adapt to the conditions of their time. These findings show that life on Earth was not only diverse, but also remarkably exotic, and many of these forms existed long before the appearance of the first known multicellular organisms. The Ediacaran biota remains an active area of research as scientists strive to unravel the mysteries of their origin and evolution. Discoveries made in the 20th century continue to shed light on these strange creatures, which may be the key to understanding the early stages of life on our planet. The Cambrian explosion, which occurred approximately 500 million years ago, represents one of the most remarkable and revolutionary periods in the history of life on Earth. During this time, there was a sharp increase in biological diversity, which can be described as a true evolutionary fairy tale. Within a relatively short period, around 25 million years, the oceans were filled with numerous new forms of life, including the ancestors of almost all modern animal groups. This period can be seen as a time when evolution was literally experimenting with various forms and strategies of survival. In the ancient oceans, organisms with shells, claws, and jaws emerged, which had no predecessors. For example, trilobites, which first appeared during this period, had a complex body structure and a hard exoskeleton, allowing them to successfully adapt to various environmental conditions. A significant event of this period was the appearance of the first predators, such as Anomalocaris, which could reach lengths of up to 1.5 meters and had powerful mouthparts for hunting less protected organisms. This predator became a symbol of the new order in the oceans, where food chains began to form according to new rules. Unique marine ecosystems began to develop, including not only predators, but also organisms that used various survival strategies, such as water filtration for food or camouflage from enemies. The appearance of diverse forms of life, such as brachiopods and mollusks, led to the creation of new ecosystems that became more complex and interdependent. Studies show that during the Cambrian period, not only did the number of species increase, but their anatomy and physiology also became significantly more complex. For example, many organisms acquired a segmented body, which allowed them to better adapt to movement on the ocean floor and in the water column. During this time, eyes also developed, providing new opportunities for hunting and avoiding predators, as many organisms began to depend on vision for finding food. The Cambrian explosion was a true laboratory of nature, where evolution manifested itself in the most diverse forms. As a result, according to paleontologists, more than 500 new types of organisms appeared during this period, and this number continued to grow. This time can be compared to a true biological renaissance, when life on Earth spread its wings and began actively exploring all available niches. Unique finds, such as fossils from the Burgess Shale Formation in Canada, demonstrate the remarkable diversity and complexity of life that existed during this time. These fossils, dating back to around 500 million years ago, have preserved details of anatomy that allow us to better understand what these organisms looked like and how they interacted with each other. Ultimately, the Cambrian explosion laid the foundation for the further evolution of multicellular organisms and determined the subsequent stages of life's development on the planet, including the appearance of complex ecosystems and the diversity of forms that we observe today. The Burgess Shale is a unique fossil deposit located in Canada, in the province of British Columbia, which has become a true window into Cambrian life. These shales, dating back approximately 500 million years, are not just fossils, but a treasure trove of information about early forms of life on Earth. The discovery of the Burgess Shale occurred in 1935, when geologist Robert Stanley Brown found this site, and since then it has been the subject of numerous studies. Thanks to exceptional preservation conditions, which have retained not only the hard parts of organisms, but also soft tissues, scientists have been able to obtain unique data on marine life of that time. Among the finds, one can encounter such unusual creatures as Opisthophora, with numerous appendages, and annelids, which resemble modern worms but have a completely different structure. The Burgess Shale also contains fossil representatives of the chordate group, such as Pikaia, which is considered one of the earliest ancestors of vertebrates. These discoveries have fundamentally changed our understanding of animal evolution, becoming a sensation in the scientific world. For example, a study conducted in 1991 showed that many of the organisms found, such as marbosaurs and trilobites, have anatomical features that are not found in modern animals. This led to a reassessment of our understanding of how multicellular organisms evolved and how they adapted to various environmental conditions. The Burgess Shale demonstrated that the diversity of life forms during the Cambrian period was much greater than previously thought. For example, among the finds were creatures with exotic body forms, such as Calypsocephala, which had a complex oral apparatus that allowed it to hunt small organisms. These discoveries not only enriched our collection of knowledge about the past, but also opened new horizons for the study of evolutionary processes. The uniqueness of the Burgess Shale lies in the fact that it provides an opportunity to look at the early stages of the formation of complex ecosystems that became the basis for further development of life on Earth. Findings from this deposit, including more than 30 species of fossils, indicate that life in the oceans was not only diverse, but also complex. For example, fossils such as Dinogena have a structure that remains a mystery to scientists. It is important to note that many of these organisms do not have modern counterparts, which further emphasizes the uniqueness of the Burgess Shale as a scientific resource. Research continues, and with each new discovery, we gain more information about how life developed on our planet. The Paleozoic era is a crucial period in the history of Earth, spanning approximately 600 million to 250 million years ago. This time can be considered the foundation of modern biodiversity, when life on the planet began to develop at an unprecedented pace. During this era, a series of revolutionary changes occurred, leading to the complexity of ecosystems and the emergence of new ecological niches. Notably, life made a decisive step from inhabiting only aquatic environments to colonizing land. Over millions of years, organisms living in oceans began to conquer new territories and adapt to conditions previously unknown. One of the key moments in this process was the development of the first land plants, which began to produce oxygen and create conditions for the life of other organisms. These plants, such as mosses and ferns, became the basis for the formation of soil and the creation of ecosystems that facilitated further life development. The appearance of terrestrial animals, such as early amphibians, marked a significant stage in the history of life on Earth. These creatures not only adapted to land, but also began to develop new ways of movement and feeding, allowing them to occupy new ecological niches. The Paleozoic era is also famous for the appearance of the first vertebrates, such as fish, which developed their fins and jaws, giving them an advantage in the struggle for survival. Evolutionary innovations of this time led to the diversity of life forms that we observe today. For example, fish with jaws, which appeared around 400 million years ago, became the ancestors of all terrestrial vertebrates. This period also witnessed the emergence of ecosystems where many species interacted, creating complex food chains. The increase in the diversity of organisms contributed to the formation of new ecosystems, each providing unique conditions for life. The Paleozoic era ended with a mass extinction event around 250 million years ago, which wiped out almost 90% of all species. This event, known as the Great Dying, opened the door to new forms of life, thus preparing the ground for the Mesozoic era. An important aspect of the Paleozoic era is that it was during this period that life on Earth made the transition to a variety of forms and adaptations, which became the basis for all future evolutionary processes. Plants and animals that then began to conquer land became the ancestors of the modern ecosystems we know today. The Paleozoic era was a time not only of changes, but also of innovations that laid the foundation for the biosphere as we know it. During the Silurian period, which spanned from 430 to 410 million years ago, significant changes occurred on Earth, affecting not only the animal world, but also the plant life. It was during this time that the first land plants appeared on land, acting as true pioneers in the colonization of new ecological niches. These primitive plants, known as mosses and liverworts, lacked roots and leaves, making them vulnerable in environments where water and light became crucial resources. Along the shores of ancient oceans, where moist soil met salt water, low-growing green stems rose above the ground, like the vanguard of a great land conquest. These plants had to adapt to completely new conditions, requiring extraordinary resilience and innovative solutions. To protect themselves from drying out, they developed special structures that minimized water loss through their surfaces. For instance, mosses formed waxy layers that helped retain moisture. In conditions where sunlight became an integral part of their lives, they had to find ways to maintain their bodies against the force of gravity, which was a real challenge on land. They used simple mechanisms like rigid cells to provide support and stability, preventing stems from bending under their own weight. The dispersal of spores became another crucial task for these pioneers. Unlike aquatic plants, which could rely on currents to spread their spores, terrestrial plants had to develop new strategies. They began using wind to carry their spores over long distances, allowing them to colonize new territories and inhabit areas of land previously uninhabitable for life. Thus, the Silurian period marked the beginning of a new era in Earth's history, when life on land began to actively develop and evolve. These early land plants, such as Cooksonia, which were only a few centimeters tall, played a pivotal role in shaping ecosystems that later formed the basis for more complex forms of life. The first land plants of the Silurian period laid the foundation for future forests. The Devonian period, which spanned from 401 to 369 million years ago, earned its nickname the Age of Fish, due to the incredible diversity of these creatures that filled ancient oceans. During this time, water bodies teemed with life, from tiny fish covered in bony plates to giant predators with powerful jaws capable of tearing their prey apart. Among the first fish on the planet were jawless fish like lampreys and mixins, which retained their primitive structure. They inhabited the oceans and fed by attaching to larger creatures, making them unique in the ecosystem of that era. Meanwhile, armored fish like ostracoderms and antiarchs developed, possessing protective bony coverings that allowed them to survive in the constant struggle for existence. These armored fish dominated the early Devonian and were true giants of their time, reaching lengths of up to 2 meters. Cartilaginous fish like sharks and rays appeared later, and their adaptations made them some of the most effective predators in the oceans. They had sharp teeth and streamlined bodies, enabling them to move quickly in search of prey. Bony fish like trigonotids showed the greatest diversity, with over 37 families, including well-known representatives like salmon and trout, which appeared in the late Devonian. At this time, the first coral reefs formed, serving as homes for numerous marine creatures, including mollusks and crustaceans, creating complex ecosystems. These reefs grew and developed into massive underwater structures that were true oases of life. In the deep ocean, strange bioluminescent predators like the lobed shark and dolphins hunted their prey in the darkness of the ocean, using their bioluminescent abilities to attract food. During this time, marine life was diverse and dynamic, and each new species that appeared in Devonian waters contributed to the complex web of life. The Devonian period was a significant milestone in evolution, as it was when fish began to dominate the waterways, and their influence on ecosystems is still felt today. By the end of the Devonian period, the ancestors of the first terrestrial vertebrates appeared, marking the beginning of a new era in the evolution of life on Earth. During the Devonian period, which lasted from approximately 411 to 360 million years ago, the first tetrapods emerged, marking a significant stage in the evolution of vertebrates. These transitional creatures, such as Tiktaalik and Acanthostega, began to develop adaptations that allowed them to leave aquatic environments and explore shallow waters. Tiktaalik, discovered in 2006 in Canada, is a unique combination of fish and amphibian. Its skull resembles that of a fish, but has a wider and flatter shape, and its fins gradually transformed into primitive limbs. This allowed it to not only swim, but also crawl on shallow ground. Acanthostega, found in 2000 in Greenland, had similar features. Its fins were equipped with bony structural elements that provided support for movement on land. Both groups of creatures had gills for breathing underwater, but also developed lungs, enabling them to breathe air when on land. These adaptations were crucial as they inhabited marshy coastal areas and drying up water bodies, where access to oxygen and the ability to move on land provided a significant evolutionary advantage. In such conditions, they could avoid predators and search for food on land, which contributed to their survival in changing climates. The appearance of these first tetrapods laid the foundation for subsequent colonization of terrestrial ecosystems, and their evolutionary experiments with limb form and function were a crucial step in the further development of amphibians and reptiles. These creatures, ahead of their time, were already leading to the eventual dominance of terrestrial vertebrates on the planet. For example, Tiktaalik could reach lengths of up to half a meter and had scales like a fish, which helped it retain moisture when on land. Carboniferous forests, which existed approximately 300 million years ago, were unique ecosystems that differed significantly from modern green expanses. These forests emerged in warm and humid climates, which facilitated the growth of giant spore-bearing plants such as ferns, horsetails, and club mosses. They formed a dense green canopy reaching heights of up to 30 meters, creating dark and shaded spaces at ground level. In such conditions, light barely penetrated, except in rare spots where gaps formed between the massive trunks of trees and thick undergrowth. These ancient forests were devoid of flowering plants and grasses, giving them a unique appearance. Instead of the familiar bright colors and variety of forms, green and brown hues dominated, and the purpose of plant life was reproduction through spores. Spores, carried by the wind, created entire clouds, making the air dense and thick. Dead plant material accumulated on the ground, creating favorable conditions for the formation of coal. These forests stretched over vast areas, and their roots penetrated into the moist soil rich in organic matter, ensuring the steady growth of giant ferns. One can imagine how various organisms inhabited these ecosystems, from insects to early amphibians seeking shelter in the shady corners. These forests laid the foundation for future coal deposits, which later played a crucial role in the development of industry. Notably, during the Carboniferous period, there was a mass proliferation of spore-bearing plants, leading to the formation of enormous coal seams that are still used today. During the Carboniferous period, which spanned from 360 to 290 million years ago, Earth was home to true giants among insects. One of the most striking species were dragonflies, with wingspans reaching up to 70 centimeters. These predatory insects soared over ancient swamps, using their powerful wings for maneuvers in dense vegetation. It was during this period that centipedes, measuring over 2 meters in length, also emerged. Their impressive size allowed them to easily traverse soft ground and tear apart small invertebrates, forming the basis of the ecosystem of the time. Such sizes of arthropod giants were possible due to the high oxygen content in the atmosphere, which in some regions reached 35%, twice as much as today. This unusual amount of oxygen allowed them to develop their bodies to incredible sizes, unlike modern insects, which are limited in size due to insufficient oxygen. Giant scorpions, measuring up to 40 centimeters, hunted in the undergrowth, using their powerful pincers to capture prey, while spiders, the size of a hand, spun webs in dense vegetation, waiting for victims. Scientists like Professor David E. Carey studied the fossils of these creatures and concluded that their gigantism not only protected them from predators, but also facilitated successful hunting. The diversity of forms and sizes of these insects indicates a high level of adaptation and evolution in conditions that no longer exist. These remarkable creatures had a significant impact on the ecosystems of their time, and their fossils have become important finds for paleontologists, supporting the theory of the dependence of animal sizes on the level of oxygen in the atmosphere. Scientific research shows that even small changes in the ecosystem can lead to the disappearance of such giants, which happened at the end of the Carboniferous period when the oxygen level began to decline, marking the beginning of the end for these impressive creatures. During the formation of coal deposits, a crucial role is played by the remains of ancient plants that accumulated in marshy and wet conditions over millions of years. These plants, such as ferns, horsetails, and gymnosperms, fell and partially decomposed in water-rich ecosystems. However, due to the low oxygen levels in the water, the decomposition process slowed down, allowing the plant material to accumulate layer by layer over hundreds of thousands of years. This slow process led to the formation of peat, which became the starting point for the formation of coal seams. Initially, peat formed as a loose mass consisting of partially decomposed plant remains. Over time, under the pressure of overlying soil layers and the influence of heat, this peat transformed into coal. The metamorphosis process, occurring at depths ranging from 30 to 150 meters, requires not only time, but also ideal conditions such as the absence of oxygen and the presence of pressure. As the peat rises through soil layers, minerals are incorporated into it, and its structure becomes more compact. As the coal is further compressed, it passes through several stages. First, it becomes coking coal, then coke, and finally anthracite, which has the highest heating value. The formation of coal deposits typically takes from 10 to 30 million years, making coal not just a combustible fossil fuel, but also a sort of archive of solar energy stored in plants that grew in ancient tropical forests. Modern coal mines can be seen as time machines, extracting and transforming solar energy that was stored in plants that existed on Earth hundreds of millions of years ago. For example, the coal deposits in Pennsylvania were formed during the Carboniferous period, which lasted from 360 to 291 million years ago. These coal seams, reaching thicknesses of up to 30 meters, are the result of the repeated accumulation of plant material that eventually became the source of coal used in modern power stations. Thus, by studying coal deposits, we not only investigate sources of energy, but also delve into the history of our planet, observing how life and climate have changed over millions of years. Coal, formed from ancient forests, became the basis for the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, contributing to the development of energy and machinery. Today, coal continues to be a significant source of energy worldwide, accounting for approximately 30% of global electricity consumption. The Permian extinction, which occurred around 250 million years ago, represents the greatest catastrophe in Earth's history, when nearly 90% of all life on the planet disappeared. This event took place at the end of the Permian period, when ecosystems that had been forming for millions of years were on the brink of complete collapse. Imagine a world where dense forests filled with diverse forms of life are replaced by lifeless landscapes where no sound can be heard. All of this happened over a relatively short period, and life that once thrived on Earth was almost completely wiped off its surface. At that moment, the biosphere was closest to total annihilation, and recovery from such a catastrophe required millions of years. The extinction affected not only terrestrial ecosystems, but also marine ones, which were teeming with unique forms of life, including trilobites and ancient corals. These organisms, which dominated the seas, were threatened with extinction, leaving behind only empty shells and fossils that testify to the once bustling life. It is interesting that many of the species that survived became the foundation for further evolution and the diversity we observe today. The recovery of ecosystems was slow and painful, and it took millions of years after this event for Earth to once again bloom. The emergence of new species and the restoration of old ones took many geological epochs, during which life adapted to new conditions, creating entirely different ecosystems. Over these millions of years, Earth experienced numerous cataclysms, but the Permian extinction was a turning point when life on the planet was on the brink of extinction. This is not just about the extinction of individual species, but about a massive catastrophe that destroyed entire ecosystems and put the biosphere at risk of complete collapse. This era left a deep mark in the geological history of the planet, reminding us of how fragile life is and how it depends on ecological balance. Recovery took tens of millions of years before nature could return to its former diversity, but even after that, much had changed. Scientific research has shown that traces of this catastrophic event can still be found in geological layers, where fossils from that time serve as a reminder of how powerful and destructive this extinction was. Today, the study of the Permian extinction remains a relevant topic for paleontologists and geologists who are striving to understand how Earth was able to recover from this catastrophe and what lessons can be drawn from it for the present day. The Siberian Traps represent one of the most significant volcanic events in Earth's history, which may have played a crucial role in the Permian extinction. These colossal eruptions began around 250 million years ago and continued for several 100,000 years, releasing lava flows that covered territories comparable in size to modern Europe. The volcanic activity occurred over a vast area, reaching approximately 2 million square kilometers, and left behind powerful layers of basaltic rock, known as the Siberian Traps. During the eruptions, enormous volumes of carbon dioxide and sulfur-containing compounds were released into the atmosphere, causing abrupt changes in atmospheric composition. These changes, in turn, could have led to global warming, as increased carbon dioxide levels enhanced the greenhouse effect. Meanwhile, sulfur emissions contributed to the formation of sulfuric acid in the atmosphere, potentially resulting in acid rain that destroyed ecosystems and polluted water bodies. Scientific research indicates that such atmospheric and oceanic changes could have triggered a cascade of catastrophic consequences for the biosphere. For example, a sharp deterioration in living conditions could have led to mass extinctions of flora and fauna, making it difficult for other species to adapt. Studies conducted in the 20th century revealed a significant reduction in the diversity of marine organisms during this period. During these eruptions, volcanic gas clouds formed that could block sunlight, further exacerbating climate conditions. Ultimately, the volcanic activity associated with the Siberian Traps could have not only altered the climate, but also disrupted food chains, leading to one of the most massive extinctions in Earth's history, in which more than 90% of all species disappeared. Some fossil remains found in layers dating to this period exhibit signs of stress and adaptation to the drastically changed conditions. The Siberian Traps, therefore, are not only a geological phenomenon, but also a key to understanding the mechanisms of mass extinctions, clearly demonstrating how volcanism can impact life on the planet. The Mesozoic era, spanning from 250 to 66 million years ago, is a unique middle age in Earth's history, situated between the Permian and Cretaceous Paleogene mass extinctions. This period is marked by a global recovery of ecosystems following a catastrophe that saw over 90% of species go extinct. During the Triassic period, which began around 250 million years ago, Earth began to slowly heal. New groups of organisms emerged, filling the vacant ecological niches. For instance, the first dinosaurs, such as Eoraptor, began their evolution in conditions where the climate became warmer and wetter. By the Jurassic period, which started around 200 million years ago, reptiles dominated the land, and iconic species like Diplodocus and Allosaurus emerged. This was also the time when the first true mammals, such as Morganucodon, appeared, struggling for survival in a world filled with large predators. Around 150 million years ago, during the Cretaceous period, there was further diversification of flora and fauna. flowering plants appeared, radically altering Earth's landscapes and providing new food sources for animals. This time is often referred to as the Age of Reptiles, although it was actually an era of great evolutionary innovations in many groups of animals and plants. Birds, as descendants of dinosaurs, developed and became a significant part of ecosystems, starting with Archaeopteryx, which appeared around 150 million years ago. In the oceans, amidst the diversity of coral reefs, marine reptiles such as plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs began to dominate by the end of the Mesozoic era. These creatures, with their various adaptations, thrived in their time. Meanwhile, on land, mammals began to evolve, adapting to new conditions, which laid the groundwork for their future proliferation. This period witnessed complex interactions between species as ecosystems gradually recovered and became more diverse. By the end of the Mesozoic era, despite the advancements in the development of various groups, signs of a new cataclysm were already apparent, ultimately leading to the extinction of the dinosaurs. The Triassic period, which lasted from 253 to 200 million years ago, was a time of destruction and rebirth following the Permian mass extinction, the most catastrophic mass extinction in Earth's history, during which approximately 90% of all species perished. The onset of the Triassic brought a world of desolation. Ecosystems were in shock, and the flora and fauna that had previously thrived were almost entirely wiped out. Against this grim backdrop, the first signs of life's recovery began to emerge. Small groups of organisms that had survived the catastrophe started to fill the ecological niches left vacant by the extinction. Large forests that had once dominated the planet gave way to more open spaces, where new plant species such as conifers and ferns adapted to the hot and arid climate. On the supercontinent Pangaea, temperatures reached up to 35 degrees Celsius, creating conditions for the formation of vast deserts and hot steppes. As the world began to slowly recover, new groups of reptiles began to occupy the ecological niches left by the extinct species. Around the middle of the Triassic period, the ancestors of dinosaurs appeared, beginning to evolve and adapt to the diverse environmental conditions. They became the dominant group of animals, with unique characteristics such as an upright posture and powerful limbs, enabling them to move efficiently across open spaces. Simultaneously, other groups of reptiles, such as crocodiles and turtles, adapted to aquatic environments and began to develop new survival strategies. Crocodiles, for instance, became inhabitants of both freshwater and saltwater, allowing them to occupy various niches in ecosystems. Turtles, with their unique protective shell, began to colonize both terrestrial and aquatic spaces. These species that survived the catastrophe formed the basis for the future diversity of reptiles, including dinosaurs, and laid the foundation for ecosystems that would dominate the Mesozoic era. Progressive changes in climate, such as increased temperature and decreased humidity, facilitated the adaptation of organisms, leading to the formation of complex ecosystems capable of further development. Moreover, the Triassic period was a crucial stage in the evolution of life on Earth, as it was during this time that the diversification of reptiles occurred, paving the way for the emergence of mammals and birds in subsequent geological epochs. These changes formed the basis for ecosystems that would dominate the Mesozoic era, when dinosaurs became the dominant predators on the planet. Throughout the Triassic period, numerous significant changes occurred that determined the further evolution of life on Earth. Pangaea was a colossal supercontinent that existed approximately 300 million years ago and united nearly all the landmasses of Earth into a massive single landmass. This continent was surrounded by a single ocean known as Panthalassa, which occupied a large portion of the planet's surface. Pangaea formed as a result of the fusion of numerous smaller continents, and its existence significantly influenced the climate of Earth. On this supercontinent, not only were there vast territories with diverse ecosystems, but also climatic conditions that differed greatly from those of today. The interior regions of Pangaea experienced extreme temperatures, with hot and dry climates over large distances from the sea, while the coasts, conversely, had a more moderate climate due to the influence of the ocean. These climatic contrasts created unique conditions for the evolution of life. The ocean currents in Panthalassa played a crucial role in distributing heat across the planet, which affected the formation of ecosystems and the migration of species. For instance, warm currents contributed to the development of tropical forests, while cold waters stimulated the diversity of marine flora and fauna. On Pangaea, diverse species of animals and plants coexisted, including early dinosaurs, reptiles, and ancient plants. Approximately 100 million years later, Pangaea began to break apart, leading to the formation of today's continents and the transformation of marine and terrestrial biota. This disintegration caused changes in ocean currents, which, in turn, influenced the climate and the evolution of various species. The existence of Pangaea and its disintegration laid the foundation for modern ecosystems, forming biogeographic barriers and creating conditions in which species could adapt and evolve. Furthermore, as a result of these changes, around 200 million years ago, a new era began on Earth, in which dinosaurs became dominant creatures and ecosystems were transformed beyond recognition. Internal regions of Pangaea were characterized by harsh and remote territories where the climate was shaped by continental influences. Here, an extreme continental climate prevailed, with extremely hot summers, where temperatures could reach 35 degrees Celsius, and cold winters, when temperatures dropped to -20 degrees. Central areas of the supercontinent were covered with vast deserts and semi-deserts, creating expansive spaces where life existed only in the most adapted forms. In such conditions, rare oases around scattered lakes and rivers served as the sole sanctuaries for flora and fauna. For instance, in the vicinity of modern deserts like the Namib and Kalahari, one can observe how plants such as aloe and various types of cacti developed unique mechanisms for water storage and heat protection. These plants could survive for months without rain, using their roots to delve deep into the soil in search of water. Animals, such as ornithopod dinosaurs, adapted to life in these conditions, developing migration capabilities to seek food and water, which allowed them to survive in the harsh climatic conditions. Internal regions of Pangaea were also the site of numerous geological changes. For example, as a result of tectonic activity, vast mountain ranges such as the Appalachians began to form, which, despite their current fame, were still in the process of rising from the Earth's depths. These mountains created additional barriers to air movement, exacerbating the contrast between the hot summers and cold winters. In such conditions, life constantly faced challenges that required special adaptations. Plants and animals were forced to develop mechanisms for water retention and protection against extreme temperatures. For example, some dinosaur species, such as the Triceratops, had robust body structures and thick skin, which allowed them to retain heat and protect themselves from cold winds in winter. These adaptations were necessary for survival in conditions where resources such as water and food were scarce and had to be fiercely competed for. As a result, internal regions of Pangaea became a true laboratory for evolution, where survival depended on the ability of organisms to adapt to changing conditions. The atmosphere was filled with dust and sand, and the sky was often obscured by clouds that did not bring rain. In such conditions, life developed in a complex struggle, where every drop of water was invaluable. These regions became home to unique ecosystems, which, despite their remoteness and harshness, were teeming with life. Isolated from oceanic influences, internal regions of Pangaea formed their own ecological niche, where each plant and animal had its place in this complex system. Adaptation to continental climate conditions required enormous efforts from organisms, highlighting their resilience and ability to survive. Ultimately, it was in these harsh conditions that unique species emerged, which later became the foundation for modern ecosystems. The breakup of Pangaea began around 180 million years ago during the Jurassic period, when tectonic forces began to actively act on the continental crust. This monumental geological process was the result of the movement of lithospheric plates, which spread apart, creating tension in the Earth's crust. Initially, narrow marine straits such as Tethys appeared, which separated Laurasia and Gondwana. In the further process of splitting, these straits widened, turning into full-fledged oceans. Around 100 million years ago, The formation of the Atlantic Ocean occurred when South America and Africa began to drift apart. This movement became the basis for the creation of new ocean currents, such as the Gulf Stream, which began to influence the climatic conditions in northern Europe. The breakup of Pangaea also changed the configuration of the continents, leading to the formation of mountain ranges such as the Appalachians and the Andes, which arose as a result of the collision and compression of tectonic plates. By the time the continents finally separated, the climate on Earth became significantly more diverse. The new oceans created unique conditions for the evolution and diversification of life. For example, at the beginning of the Cretaceous period, the first marine reptiles, such as plesiosaurs, appeared in the oceans, adapting to the new conditions. At this time, the evolution of flowering plants also began, which filled the continents and became the basis for new ecosystems. As a result of this geological process, life on Earth began to take on new forms and adapt to changing conditions. The complete separation of the continents was completed around 60 million years ago, when the modern configurations of continents and oceans were formed. Today, the remnants of this process can be observed in the form of faults and cracks in the Earth's crust, which testify to ancient tectonic movements. The Jurassic period, which spanned from 230 to 160 million years ago, was an era of dinosaur dominance, when they occupied leading positions among terrestrial vertebrates. This period is divided into 3 stages: Lower Jurassic, Middle Jurassic, and Upper Jurassic, each characterized by a diversity of species and ecosystems. The wet forests of the Jurassic period were inhabited by giant horsetails and ferns, creating dense undergrowth where small mammals, such as the ancestors of modern mammals, hid from predators. Large open plains covered with cycads and ginkgos provided ideal habitats for large herbivorous dinosaurs like apatosaurs and brachiosaurs. These giant sauropods, reaching lengths of up to 30 meters and weighing up to 100 tons, roamed in herds across open spaces, feeding on the leaves of tall trees. Meanwhile, in coastal swamps and lagoons, diverse marine reptiles such as plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs, top predators, hunted fish, and other marine creatures. During this time, there was a significant diversity of dinosaurs, ranging from small, agile theropods like Velociraptor to large, slow-moving stegosaurs with their distinctive plates on their backs. Scientists estimate that there were over 100 different dinosaur species in the Jurassic period, and their fossils have been found on all continents. Despite the dominance of dinosaurs, other animal groups also inhabited the Jurassic ecosystems, such as flying reptiles that colonized the skies and marine creatures, including ammonites and belemnites, which were widespread in the oceans. These ecosystems were true laboratories of evolution. Each group of animals adapted to their conditions, leading to the emergence of unique forms of life that continue to amaze us today. The Jurassic period ended around 160 million years ago, leaving behind vast deposits of fossils that continue to provide insights into life on Earth during that time. Archaeopteryx is a remarkable creature that became a symbol of the transitional stage in the evolution from reptiles to birds. This small predator, about the size of a crow, lived during the Jurassic period around 150 million years ago. Its remains, including several well-preserved fossils, were discovered in Germany, particularly in the famous Lagerstätte of Solnhofen. Archaeopteryx combined features of both dinosaurs and birds. It had teeth, a long bony tail, and claws on its wings, reminiscent of its reptilian ancestors. Its feathers, which covered its body and wings, were similar to those of modern birds, and a wishbone, or uncinate process, which supported its wings, indicated its ability to fly. Archaeopteryx was likely a versatile creature, capable of gliding from tree to tree, using its powerful wings for short flights to avoid predators or hunt small animals. Studies suggest that its lifestyle was quite active. It could use its agility to catch insects and small vertebrates, and hide from larger predators in the dense forests of the Jurassic period. The discovery of Archaeopteryx in 1859 became one of the most important confirmations of evolutionary theory, demonstrating how groups of animals gradually transformed into others. The evolutionary transition from dinosaurs to birds was not just a hypothesis, but a reality that we can observe through the fossils of Archaeopteryx, which preserve details of its anatomy and lifestyle. These fossil finds not only enriched our understanding of evolution, but also laid the foundation for further research in paleontology and biology. Archaeopteryx is not just an intermediate form, it is the key to understanding how life on Earth has changed over millions of years and how new forms of life have emerged from old ones. The Cretaceous period was the final stage of the Mesozoic era, encompassing significant changes in the geological and biological history of Earth. It was characterized by evolutionary innovations and dramatic shifts in ecosystems. During this time, continents continued to drift apart, forming the modern oceans and continents, which led to changes in climate and sea level. Sea levels reached record highs, creating vast marine shelves that became ecosystems for new biodiversity. This period witnessed the flourishing of flowering plants, which began to dominate terrestrial ecosystems, altering the familiar landscape and creating new niches for animals. The Cretaceous period also saw the emergence of new groups of dinosaurs, including giant herbivores and carnivores that filled various ecological niches. While some species reached colossal sizes, others adapted to unique conditions, creating complex food chains. This period also marked the appearance of the first mammals, which began to occupy new ecological niches, approaching a state where they could eventually dominate in the future. However, despite these achievements, the Cretaceous period ended with one of the most famous mass extinctions in Earth's history, when approximately 75% of all species, including dinosaurs, disappeared from the planet. This catastrophic crisis was likely caused by a combination of factors such as volcanic activity, meteorite impacts, and climate change, which led to a rapid deterioration of living conditions for many organisms. As a result, the Cretaceous period not only marked the end of the Mesozoic era, but also opened new opportunities for further evolution and the dominance of mammals in the subsequent Cenozoic era. The Mesozoic Sea, which existed approximately from 130 to 60 million years ago, covered extensive areas of modern continents, creating warm and shallow marine basins that flooded low-lying land areas. This sea, formed as a result of global warming and a rise in sea levels, became home to a diverse range of life forms. In its waters, ammonites, belemnites, and marine reptiles such as plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs thrived, with some reaching lengths of up to 20 meters. These reptiles, with their long necks and powerful bodies, swam among underwater forests formed by algae and corals, which provided ideal conditions for reproduction and hunting. At this time, bony fish also developed, filling ecological niches left by extinct species. The seafloor of this sea was covered with white chalky mud formed from the skeletons of microscopic organisms such as foraminifera and coccolithophores. These organisms, over millions of years, accumulated to form a layer of sediment that became known as chalk, giving its name to the entire Mesozoic era. During this period, sea levels were significantly higher than they are today, contributing to the formation of seas like the Tethys, which divided the continents into separate parts. Ancient ecosystems were incredibly diverse. The Mesozoic Sea was home to both small and giant creatures, creating a unique balance between different species. In places like modern-day France and Germany, well-preserved fossil remains of marine animals are found, allowing scientists to study the ecosystems of that time. For example, the site of La Argentière in Normandy, France, has yielded numerous fossils of ammonites, which serve as important indicators for geological research. It is worth noting that the Mesozoic Sea not only supported the lives of many organisms, but also served as a stage for complex ecological interactions that shaped marine communities. The warm water of the sea, rich in nutrients, fostered the development of complex food chains, where large predators hunted small fish and invertebrates. The result of this incredible biological diversity was the creation of marine ecosystems that formed the basis for further evolution of life on Earth. While the Mesozoic Sea provided ideal conditions for life, it also demonstrated how changes in climate and sea levels can shape entire ecosystems, where animal adaptations and technologies played a crucial role in their survival. During the Cretaceous period, approximately 120 million years ago, a true botanical revolution occurred as flowering plants, or angiosperms, began to actively displace gymnosperms, which had dominated the planet. These new plants, with their vibrant colors and fruits, became not only more attractive to pollinating insects, but also significantly more effective in reproduction. Studies show that angiosperms use symbiotic relationships with insects, allowing them to spread rapidly across all continents. For example, bees and butterflies, attracted by nectar and the scent of flowers, facilitated pollination, increasing the chances of successful reproduction. This process led to the fact that by the end of the Cretaceous period, flowering plants occupied a significant portion of the flora, creating new ecological niches and changing the appearance of Cretaceous forests. The forests of that time were filled with magnolias, plane trees, and figs, which could reach heights of up to 30 meters and form dense canopies. These trees not only gave the forests a new look, but also created new conditions for the habitation of animals. For example, magnolias, with their large and fragrant flowers, attracted numerous pollinators, contributing to the development of diverse ecosystems. Plane trees, with their wide leaves, created shade where small mammals and birds could hide. Figs, with their unique ability to be pollinated by fig wasps, provided a stable source of food for various animal species, such as parrots and bats, which specialized in eating their fruits. These changes not only transformed the landscape of the Cretaceous period, but also contributed to the appearance of new animal species that adapted to the new conditions. Studies show that the flowering plants that appeared during the Cretaceous period became the basis for ecosystems in which the interaction between plants and animals reached an unprecedented level. Throughout this period, flowering plants occupied more than 50% of all terrestrial ecosystems, which was a significant step in the evolution of the biosphere. These changes in vegetation had a profound influence on the climate and topography of the Earth, ultimately determining the further development of life on the planet. As a result, Cretaceous forests, rich in new forms of life, became one of the most diverse biomes of their time, where the interaction between plants and animals occurred at a new level of complexity. Around 66 million years ago, on the boundary of the Cretaceous and Paleogene periods, one of the most catastrophic events in Earth's history occurred: the impact of the Chicxulub asteroid. This celestial body, with a diameter of about 10 kilometers, struck the planet's surface in the vicinity of the modern Yucatan Peninsula, leaving behind a crater with a diameter of approximately 100 kilometers. The moment of impact was breathtaking. A blinding flash of light, equivalent to several thousand atomic explosions, vaporized rocks, creating a cloud of steam and debris that rose into the atmosphere to a height of more than 20 kilometers. The shockwave triggered powerful earthquakes and a gigantic tsunami that swept across the coasts, destroying everything in its path. This event released billions of tons of dust and ash into the atmosphere, leading to a rapid deterioration of the climate. Global wildfires raged across the world, decimating forests and ecosystems. The surface temperature dropped sharply, leading to what is known as the nuclear winter, where sunlight was almost completely blocked. Under these conditions, photosynthesis was threatened, and food chains began to collapse. As a result of these catastrophic changes, according to scientists, approximately 7 out of 10 species of living organisms on the planet went extinct, including non-avian dinosaurs, which had dominated Earth's fauna for millions of years. This extinction paved the way for further evolution of mammals and ultimately led to the emergence of humans. The full process of extinction took around 100,000 years, during which Earth recovered from the aftermath of this impact. One of the most striking evidence of this event is the iridium layer found in geological deposits, which indicates the extraterrestrial origin of the material that caused such massive extinction. The Cenozoic era, spanning the last 65 million years, is a period marked by dynamic changes and evolutionary transformations that have shaped the modern appearance of our planet. This era begins after the mass extinction at the boundary of the Cretaceous and Paleogene periods, known as the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event, and is characterized by the recovery and flourishing of new organism groups that filled the ecological niches left vacant by the disappearance of dinosaurs and other large reptiles. The Cenozoic is divided into three main periods: the Paleogene, Neogene, and Quaternary periods, each with unique climatic conditions and biological changes. At the start of the Paleogene, the climate was warm and humid, fostering the spread of tropical forests and flowering plants that began to dominate the land. These plants provided new food resources for developing animal groups, facilitating the rapid growth of mammalian and avian populations. During this time, various groups of mammals emerged, including the ancestors of modern elephants, whales, and primates, which adapted to diverse biomes from forests to open plains. The Neogene brought further climatic changes, with gradual cooling leading to the formation of grasslands and savannas, where mammals such as saber-toothed tigers and mammoths began to dominate. The Quaternary period, which includes the last 2 million years, is marked by significant climatic fluctuations, resulting in periods of glaciation and warming. This time saw the emergence of Homo sapiens, who began to settle new territories and develop culture, technology, and social structures. Although the Cenozoic era is often referred to as the Age of Mammals, it also encompasses the flourishing of birds, insects, flowering plants, and many other groups that adapted and evolved in response to changing environmental conditions. For example, during this time, insects such as bees emerged, playing a crucial role in the pollination of flowering plants, which in turn contributed to the diversity of ecosystems. Another significant event of the Cenozoic era is the emergence of modern ecosystems, characterized by complex interactions between species and their habitats. Throughout this era, there has been continuous change in the biosphere, with new species appearing, adapting, and sometimes going extinct, creating a dynamic picture of life on Earth. One striking example of this process is the diversity of mammals, which increased from approximately 170 species at the beginning of the Cenozoic era to more than 6,000 today, demonstrating an incredible ability to adapt and survive in various conditions. An important aspect of the Cenozoic era is also the transformation of marine ecosystems, where new groups of fish and mollusks adapted to changing ocean conditions. These changes continue to influence global ecosystems and climate, shaping our modern planet. The Paleocene is a period that began approximately 65 million years ago and lasted around 10 million years. It was a time when, following the mass extinction of dinosaurs at the end of the Cretaceous period, mammals began to thrive on Earth. These small primitive mammals, such as pantodonts and mesonychids, began to occupy the ecological niches left vacant by the dinosaurs, demonstrating remarkable adaptability. Pantodonts, for instance, were a remarkably diverse group of mammals, ranging in size from a rabbit to a small elephant, and possessed massive teeth for chewing vegetation. These creatures, which inhabited the territories of modern-day North America and Europe, could reach lengths of up to 2 meters. Mesonychids, on the other hand, were predators similar to modern wolves, but had unique teeth that indicated their distinctive evolutionary strategy. These creatures appeared around the beginning of the Paleocene and quickly dominated ecosystems, adapting to various conditions and food sources. Multituberculates, another notable group of mammals from this time, had characteristic multituberculated teeth, indicating the diversity of their diet. These evolutionary experiments demonstrate how mammals began to fill the niches previously occupied by dinosaurs, but many of these forms proved unsuccessful and soon disappeared. For example, mesonychids were unable to adapt to changes in climate and ecosystems, leading to their extinction by the end of the Paleocene. Evolution during this time appeared as an endless experiment, where each new form of life struggled for survival in the face of competition and changing climate. By the end of the Paleocene, mammals began to acquire more specialized forms that eventually led to the emergence of modern groups. But the Paleocene will be remembered as a time of bold experiments and evolutionary changes. Populations of mammals in this period could include up to 6 different species of pantodonts, while mesonychids were represented by several genera, such as Mesonyx and Delphodon. The formation of the Himalayas was a monumental event in the history of Earth, beginning approximately 50 million years ago when the Indian tectonic plate, moving north at a speed of about 10 centimeters per year, collided with the Eurasian plate. This collision, known as a collision, resulted in an unimaginable compression and uplift of the Earth's crust, ultimately creating one of the highest mountain ranges on the planet. The Himalayas reach heights of over 8 kilometers above sea level, and this is not just a geographical fact, but the result of a multi-million-year process that continues to influence the climate and ecosystems of the region. The rise of these mountain masses altered global weather systems, creating a barrier for monsoon winds, which led to the formation of lush rainforests on the southern slope and arid conditions on the northern side. These changes created new ecological niches that became the basis for the diversity of flora and fauna in this region. For example, in the Himalayas, one can find rare plant species such as rhododendrons and 30-year-old beeches that have adapted to the extreme conditions of altitude. Additionally, mountain ecosystems have become home to unique animals such as the Himalayan bear and the snow leopard, which have developed adaptations to life in the harsh conditions of high mountains. The formation of the Himalayas also affected the migration routes of many species, changing their distribution and evolution. For example, some bird species began to migrate over long distances to adapt to the new conditions that emerged as a result of mountain building. This ongoing process of plate collision and mountain uplift continues to this day, and scientists such as Dr. John Griffiths from the University of London continue to study the tectonic processes that shape our planet. It is interesting that the Himalayas continue to grow, while erosion also affects their structure, creating a unique balance between formation and destruction. This phenomenon serves as a reminder that Earth is not static, but constantly changing and evolving under the influence of massive geological forces. The Paleocene thermal maximum was a period in the early history of the Cenozoic era when Earth's climate was significantly warmer than it is today. During this time, there were no ice caps at the poles. The global ocean was warmer and sea levels were at significantly higher levels, creating conditions for extensive tropical and subtropical ecosystems that extended far north and south of the equator. Vegetation thrived, covering much of the land with lush green forests. In the places where today's Arctic deserts are located, there were dense forests of coniferous and deciduous trees that provided ideal conditions for the life of many animal groups. Crocodiles, turtles, and even heat-loving mammals, such as the primitive ancestors of modern elephants and apes, inhabited these regions, enjoying the mild climate and abundant food. At the same time, the diversity of flora and fauna increased, allowing many species to adapt and evolve. Scientists like Dr. David Sloan from the University of California study fossil remains found in places that are now cold and uninhabited. For example, in Antarctica, remnants of trees and plants have been discovered, indicating the presence of forests in this region. The Paleocene also saw a time of great animal migrations as they sought new habitats in the changing climate. Mammals such as early primates began to disperse into new ecosystems, contributing to their evolution and diversity. In the south of the continent, in areas now known as Australia and South America, there were unique ecosystems with a high degree of endemism. The diversity of vegetation also contributed to the formation of complex food chains, which in turn determined the dynamics of the ecosystems. The period of the Paleocene thermal maximum was a significant stage in Earth's history when climatic conditions favored the flourishing of life. Even in places where today's deserts are located, there were extensive forest areas, as evidenced by coal deposits. This creates a vivid image of a planet where life thrived, and ecosystems were diverse and dynamic, forming a rich biosphere that was significantly different from the modern one. As a result of climate and ecosystem changes, this period became the basis for the subsequent evolution and adaptation of many animal and plant species. Important findings such as fossilized ancient trees and animals have allowed scientists to understand how the climate changed and how this influenced life on Earth. In particular, in Siberia, traces of ancient forests have been found that existed on territories now covered by ice. Eocene tropical forests of Antarctica represent one of the most extraordinary and unique ecosystems that ever existed on Earth, dating back approximately 40 million years. At that time, when the current southern polar continent was covered in lush forests, the climate was significantly different from today's. Temperatures reached 30 degrees Celsius, and warm ocean currents created conditions for the growth of diverse flora and fauna. On the slopes of ancient hills, southern beeches, podocarps, and other tree species grew, forming dense forests that stretched for thousands of kilometers. These forests were home to unique animals such as marsupial mammals, which were likely ancestors of modern kangaroos and koalas. While marsupial mammals roamed the undergrowth, giant flightless birds like the diatryma reached heights of more than 3 meters and were the dominant terrestrial predators, controlling the ecosystem. Scientific research conducted in the 20th century revealed that these forests also harbored a variety of insects and reptiles, which played a crucial role in maintaining the ecosystem's balance. Paleontological findings, such as fossilized trees and animal remains, confirm that during this period, Antarctica was one of the greenest and most picturesque continents on Earth. Important discoveries were made in places like the Sandwich Islands and the Falkland Islands, where scientists found fossilized remains of entire forest ecosystems and animals that could not survive in today's conditions. For example, on the southern coast of Antarctica, fragments of trees belonging to the podocarp family, dating back more than 50 million years, were found, indicating that the forests were not only diverse, but also quite ancient. The contrast between this ancient green continent and the modern Antarctica, buried under a kilometer of ice, is striking. Today, this continent is mostly vast ice deserts, where temperatures never rise above 0 degrees Celsius, and life is largely limited to marine animals and a few bird species. Studies of ice cores extracted from the depths of Antarctic glaciers show that climate changes over the past millions of years led to a significant cooling and the formation of an ice cap that covered the entire territory. As a result, the ecosystems that once thrived were completely destroyed, leaving only traces in the form of fossilized remains and ancient paleoclimatic data. Eocene tropical forests of Antarctica are not just a part of history. They are a reminder of how quickly climate can change and how this affects the biodiversity of the planet. Scientific research, such as the work of paleobotanists, continues to delve into the study of these ancient ecosystems. And perhaps soon we will learn more about life in the Eocene forests that once covered this now icy continent. An important discovery was that these forests also contained ancient species of ferns and conifers that still exist on other continents, providing insights into their spread and adaptation. The appearance and evolution of cetaceans represent one of the most fascinating examples of mammalian adaptation to aquatic environments. The first ancestors of modern cetaceans, pachycetids, lived approximately 43 million years ago in the coastal regions of present-day Pakistan, and had a wolf-like form, allowing them to hunt both on land and in water. These creatures had short limbs and flat teeth, indicating an omnivorous diet. Around 40 million years ago, ambuloceids appeared, which were more crocodile-like and had a semi-aquatic lifestyle. They were better adapted to life in water while retaining the ability to move on land. A key aspect of their evolution was the development of a more streamlined body shape, which improved their swimming capabilities. Fossil remains of ambuloceids found in India and Pakistan show that their front limbs began to transform into the first rudimentary flippers, while their hind limbs gradually reduced in size. Around 35 million years ago, protocetids emerged, fully aquatic mammals that could no longer survive on land. Their nostrils migrated to the top of the head, allowing them to breathe without lifting their entire body out of the water, marking a crucial moment in cetacean evolution. Protocetids, such as the genus Basilosaurus, could reach lengths of around 15 meters and had long bodies with powerful flippers. These creatures, it is believed, had a diet similar to modern cetaceans, hunting fish, and other marine creatures. Studies of fossil finds allow us to trace these changes in minute detail. Limbs gradually transformed into flippers, and the skull shape changed to improve hydrodynamics and underwater sound perception. Complex changes in the ear structure enabled cetaceans to perceive sounds over long distances, which is crucial for life in the oceans. Modern cetaceans, such as whales and dolphins, belonging to the order Cetacea, exhibit all these evolutionary adaptations preserved in their genetic code and anatomy. For example, beluga whales, which can reach lengths of 6 meters, have unique adaptations for life in the cold waters of the Arctic, including a thick layer of blubber. Important discoveries, such as the fossilized remains of a cetacean amphibian found in Egypt in 2007, confirm that the evolution of cetaceans is a lengthy and complex process spanning millions of years and numerous changes. The Oligocene cooling, which began approximately 34 million years ago, was a pivotal event in Earth's history, paving the way for the modern climate regime. This period was characterized by a global decrease in temperature following the Paleogene climatic optimum, during which tropical and subtropical ecosystems dominated. At that time, life on Earth thrived. Dense forests covered vast areas, and diverse plant and animal species adapted to warm conditions. However, the Oligocene cooling led to the contraction of these ecosystems, giving way to more cold-tolerant biomes. The surrounding environment underwent radical changes. Tropical forests retreated southward, making way for temperate forests and steppes. This cooling also contributed to the expansion of ice sheets in Antarctica, further intensifying the process of global climate cooling. As a result, many species that could not adapt to the new conditions began to go extinct, while others, more resilient, flourished in the altered environment. The Oligocene cooling acted as a catalyst for evolutionary changes, as organisms sought new ways to survive in conditions where temperatures were significantly lower. For instance, many plants, such as conifers and shrubs, began to dominate the new ecosystems, benefiting from their ability to survive in colder climates. This climate change also affected the fauna. Mammals began to adapt to the new conditions, developing thicker fur and other characteristics that allowed them to cope with the cold. Thus, the Oligocene cooling was a crucial step in shaping the modern climate of Earth and had a significant impact on the evolutionary trajectories of many plant and animal groups. Notably, it was during this period that ecosystems began to differentiate into more distinct climatic zones, leading to the creation of unique habitats that continue to exist today. In the Miocene epoch, which lasted from 23 to 5 million years ago, a significant ecological shift occurred on Earth. Grassland ecosystems began to spread actively, displacing forests and forming new biomes such as savannas, steppes, and prairies. This happened against the backdrop of global cooling and increased seasonality of the climate, creating ideal conditions for the growth of grasses. Specifically, during this time, vast grasslands formed in North America and Eurasia, providing homes for numerous new animal species. These open landscapes offered unique evolutionary opportunities, particularly for hooved animals like antelopes and horses. The development of swift running became a key advantage for survival in conditions where predators could easily spot prey. Research shows that by the end of the Miocene, for example, horses had developed long legs and lighter bodies, allowing them to reach speeds of up to 100 kilometers per hour. Moreover, changes in vegetation led to adaptations in the teeth of herbivorous animals. Their molars became wider, enabling them to effectively grind tough grasses and tree bark. These dietary changes also contributed to the emergence of new species, such as giraffes, which adapted to eating tall grasses and leaves. In open landscapes, animals also developed new strategies for protection against predators. Many species began to form herds, making it easier to detect threats and reducing the risk of being caught. Additionally, the appearance of new predators, such as saber-toothed tigers and giant bears, increased pressure on herbivores, forcing them to develop cunning and hiding tactics. Thus, grassland ecosystems not only altered the landscape, but also became a catalyst for evolutionary changes that shaped the modern appearance of terrestrial fauna. As grasses spread and forests decreased, new biomes became the basis for complex ecosystems, where interactions between species became more diverse and complex. As a result of this ecological shift, the number of species that adapted to new conditions significantly increased. For instance, during this time in Africa, the ancestors of modern elephants began to develop, also adapting to open spaces and using grassland ecosystems as their primary food source. Ultimately, the Miocene was a time when nature radically transformed its appearance, creating conditions for the future diversity of life on Earth. In the Miocene epoch, which spanned from 23 to 5 million years ago, the ancestors of humans, such as Proconsul, Dryopithecus, and Ramapithecus, inhabited Africa and Eurasia. Proconsul, which lived approximately from 12 to 18 million years ago, was a primitive human-like ape with a larger brain compared to modern apes. It could move both in trees and on the ground, possessing long limbs and flexible joints that allowed it to climb trees freely and use primitive tools. Dryopithecus, which lived around 7 million years ago, exhibited more pronounced features that foreshadowed future hominids. Its upright posture and omnivorous diet enabled it to adapt to diverse food sources, including fruits, leaves, and insects. Dryopithecus inhabited tropical forests where food resources were more abundant than today, contributing to their varied diet. Ramapithecus, which existed roughly from 8 to 12 million years ago, played a crucial role in human evolution. Its skull structure and teeth showed transitional features between apes and early hominids. These creatures had a relatively larger brain and could employ various hunting and gathering strategies, indicating a developed social structure. During this period, forests covered extensive areas, providing favorable conditions for life and evolution. It was during the Miocene that the evolutionary lines leading to modern human-like apes and humans diverged, marking a pivotal moment for further development. Traits observed in these ancient ancestors, such as the ability to walk upright and use tools, became significant steps on the path to modern humans. An important aspect of this evolutionary process was that it was during this time that human ancestors began to adapt to new ecosystems, opening up new opportunities for survival and adaptation. Proconsul, Dryopithecus, and Ramapithecus formed the foundation for the development of our species, and their living conditions and survival strategies provided the impetus for further evolution. In this context, it is particularly interesting that changes in climate and the surrounding environment during the Miocene favored the survival of those species that possessed unique adaptive advantages. These changes led to the emergence of new life forms that later became the basis for the appearance of Homo sapiens. The Pliocene was a period when the climate and geography of Earth began to approach the conditions we know today, shaping the world as we know it. During this time, continents had already taken their current positions, and oceans were beginning to take on their familiar appearance. Over this period, which lasted from 5.5 to 2.5 million years ago, climatic conditions became more diverse and complex. An increase in oxygen levels in the atmosphere and a decrease in carbon dioxide created conditions for the rapid growth of flora and fauna. Modern biomes began to form, leading to the emergence of familiar ecosystems such as forests, savannas, and steppes, which became important habitats for many animal and plant species. This time can be characterized as a crucial transitional stage between the warm Miocene and the cold Pleistocene. During the Pliocene, significant glaciation occurred in the high latitudes, heralding the approaching Ice Age. Notably, changes in ocean currents, such as the onset of the cold Benguela Current, began to influence the climate in various parts of the world. Additionally, the active formation of mountain ranges like the Alps and Himalayas also affected climatic conditions. These mountain formations created barriers that altered the migration paths of animals and plants, giving rise to new ecosystems. The diversity of climatic conditions led to many groups of animals and plants acquiring a recognizable appearance as they adapted to new conditions. The Pliocene became a stage for competition among species, resulting in evolutionary changes. For instance, some mammals began to develop larger sizes, enabling them to survive in changing conditions, while others, with smaller sizes, became more agile and adapted to new types of food. The Pliocene was a crucial stage that prepared the biosphere for the approaching Ice Age, when the climate became significantly colder, influencing the evolution of many species. During this time, animals and plants on Earth began to form ecosystems that would later become the basis for modern biomes. For example, the appearance of the ancestors of modern elephants and horses was a result of adaptation to changing environmental conditions. The abundance of grassland ecosystems facilitated the spread of herbivorous animals, which in turn influenced the evolution of carnivores that adapted to them. The Pliocene was a time when the diversity of life on Earth increased, and many species began to inhabit the places where they live today. This period laid the foundation for the formation of ecosystems that we can observe in the present. An important fact is that during the Pliocene, sea levels changed, affecting coastal ecosystems and contributing to the formation of new habitats for marine organisms. The Messinian crisis of salinity, which occurred around 5 million years ago, was one of the most dramatic events in the history of the Mediterranean Sea. During this period, the sea was effectively cut off from the Atlantic Ocean, leading to its rapid desiccation. The water level in the Mediterranean Sea dropped by thousands of meters, and the exposed seabed became the site for the formation of gigantic salt deposits. These deposits are known today as Messinian salts and are among the largest salt formations in the world. As a result of this process, the seabed was covered with salty lakes in the deepest parts of the basin, such as the Levantine and Tyrrhenian lakes, which became true salty islands on the surface of the exposed land. Rivers that previously flowed into the sea now carved deep canyons into the dried seabed, creating impressive landscapes that can still be seen today. Research shows that some of these canyons, such as the Messinian Strait Canyon, reached depths of up to 1,000 meters. This event not only altered the geography of the region, but also had a significant impact on the climate. The decrease in sea level changed atmospheric currents, which in turn altered the climatic conditions in the surrounding areas. Furthermore, the Messinian crisis facilitated the migration of animals between Africa and Eurasia, creating a temporary land bridge. At this time, many species, such as wild goats and elephants, could freely move between the two continents, enriching the ecosystems on both sides. This unique period in the history of the planet lasted for about 1 million years before the sea level began to rise again, and the Mediterranean Sea restored its connections with the Atlantic, marking the beginning of a new era for the region. As a result of this restoration, many species that had survived the migration returned, and the ecosystems began to recover. The salts left on the seabed became an important resource that humanity began to use from ancient times, as evidenced by archaeological findings in the territories of the modern countries surrounding the Mediterranean Sea. The formation of the Isthmus of Panama began in the late Miocene and continued into the Pliocene, when volcanic activity created a land bridge between North and South America. Approximately 8 million years ago, due to the uplift of the Earth's crust and volcanic eruptions, land was formed that divided a single oceanic mass into two separate oceans, the Pacific and Atlantic. This narrow isthmus, about 150 kilometers wide, dramatically altered ocean currents, creating new conditions for water circulation. One of the most significant consequences was the strengthening of the Gulf Stream, which, flowing from the Gulf of Mexico into the Atlantic Ocean, became more powerful, bringing warm waters north and altering temperature regimes in the northern part of the planet. Before this, warm equatorial waters could freely move between the oceans, but with the formation of the Isthmus of Panama, a new era in oceanic dynamics began. These changes in currents had a serious impact on global climate, contributing to cooling in the northern hemisphere. Increasing volumes of cold water from the Pacific Ocean interacted with the warm Gulf Stream, which in turn contributed to the gradual cooling of the climate. As a result of these processes, the Ice Age began, affecting a large part of North America and Europe. Around 2 million years ago, climatic conditions began to change significantly, and continents began to be covered by glaciers, reaching several kilometers in height. Thus, the Isthmus of Panama became not only a geographical, but also a climatic barrier, which significantly influenced the ecosystems of both continents and marine life, changing the migration paths of many species. Fossilized remains of marine organisms such as mollusks and corals provide evidence of changes in ocean currents, helping scientists understand how climatic fluctuations influenced the biosphere over millions of years. These data help researchers reconstruct the climatic conditions of that era and understand how ocean currents determined not only marine, but also terrestrial life. The Great American Interchange was a biogeographical event that occurred around 3 million years ago, when the Isthmus of Panama, formed as a result of tectonic processes, connected North and South America. This bridge became the stage for a grand migration, during which the faunas of the two continents, which had long developed in isolation, began to meet and interact. Over millions of years, the animals on both sides evolved in different conditions, and now they encountered each other in a new light, where many species moved, sought new habitats and resources. Around 12,000 years ago, this interchange already showed its consequences. Many species that previously inhabited one continent began to cross paths with others, leading to both strengthening and weakening of populations. Animals such as saber-toothed tigers and giant sloths from South America encountered predators from North America, such as bears and wolves, creating a new balance in ecosystems. However, not all species survived this migration. Some animals, unable to adapt to the new conditions or competition, went extinct, while others, able to adapt, gained new opportunities for survival and reproduction. For example, as a result of the interchange, some North American species began to migrate south, changing the dynamics of local fauna, and South American animals, such as opossums, began to move north, also leading to changes in ecosystems. Moreover, in the face of these changes, significant changes in vegetation occurred, as new animal species influenced the flora, altering its composition and structure. This event became an important stage in the history of the biosphere, demonstrating how tectonic processes can determine not only geography, but also biological diversity. This interchange continues today, underscoring the importance of the Isthmus of Panama as a key element in the ecosystems of both Americas. Scientists like Professor Stephen Stewart study how genetic changes resulting from the interchange affect modern populations. They have found that many northern and southern species share common ancestral lines, confirming the theory of interaction and mixing of populations. The diversity of fauna and flora we observe today is a direct consequence of this historical interchange, which changed the appearance of both continents. An example of how the interchange occurred is the migration of large mammals, which over millions of years adapted to various climatic conditions and ecosystems. One such migration occurred around 1 million years ago, when large herds of animals began to cross the Isthmus of Panama, leading to the mixing of species and the creation of new ecosystems. The Pleistocene Ice Age, which lasted from 2 million to 10,000 years ago, was a time of colossal changes on Earth. Massive ice sheets, up to 4 kilometers thick, covered much of North America, Europe, and northern Asia, stretching from Canada to the central part of Russia. These glaciers did not merely freeze the landscape, they shaped it, creating deep lakes, fjords, and moraine hills, leaving behind diverse geological traces that we can observe today. For instance, Lake Michigan, which formed as a result of the melting of glaciers, became one of the largest freshwater lakes in the world, with an area of over 100,000 square kilometers. The periodic advance and retreat of glaciers led to significant and dynamic changes in the landscape. In some periods, vast territories were covered in ice, while in others, they became habitable again. Each cycle of the Ice Age was accompanied by fluctuations in sea level, creating and destroying land bridges between continents. During the glacial maxima, the sea level dropped, opening the Bering Land Bridge, which connected Asia and North America. This allowed animals such as mammoths and saber-toothed tigers, as well as early humans, to migrate between continents in search of food and new habitats. Scientific data show that at the end of the last glacial maximum, around 15,000 years ago, the sea level was approximately 120 meters lower than it is today, significantly increasing the amount of land and facilitating migration. In addition to geographical changes, glaciers left behind climatic alterations. Covering the land, they reflected sunlight, lowering temperatures and creating cold ecosystems. This led to the adaptation of flora and fauna to new conditions. In the taiga and tundra that emerged as a result of the Ice Age, species such as the woolly horse and mammoth, with their thick fur for protection against the cold, thrived. Meanwhile, in the more southern regions, free from ice, forests and steppes developed, where species such as reindeer and bison lived. With the end of the Pleistocene Ice Age, around 10,000 years ago, a new chapter in Earth's history began, the Holocene, when glaciers began to melt rapidly and sea levels rose again, flooding many previously accessible lands. This change in climate opened new horizons for humans, who began to cultivate agriculture and adopt a settled lifestyle. For example, on the Near East, some of the earliest agricultural cultures, such as wheat and barley, emerged, significantly altering the lifestyle of Homo sapiens. These processes that occurred during the Pleistocene Ice Age not only shaped the physical landscape of our planet, but also determined the paths of migration and adaptation of living organisms, including humans, to new conditions of existence. The Pleistocene became a pivotal stage in the evolution of Earth, leaving behind a rich legacy that we can still research and analyze today. Pleistocene megafauna presented an impressive array of giant animals that inhabited all continents, from North America to Australia. For example, mammoths could reach heights of around 4 meters and weigh up to 6 tons. These majestic creatures had long, curved tusks that they used for digging through snow and finding food beneath it. Their rough, shaggy fur, covered with underfur, helped them survive in harsh, cold conditions. Mastodons, relatives of mammoths, were slightly smaller and had more direct tusks. These animals preferred forested areas and fed on leaves and branches of trees. Hairy rhinos, which lived in the same regions as mammoths, had a powerful build and thick fur adapted to cold climates, with long and wide horns used for protection against predators and in competition for mates. Giant sloths, such as Megatherium, weighed more than a ton and could reach lengths of up to 6 meters. These slow-moving creatures, which inhabited South America, fed on leaves and twigs of trees, using their powerful front limbs to climb high into trees. Saber-toothed cats, such as Smilodon, were some of the most dangerous predators of their time, with long curved canines that allowed them to effectively hunt large herbivores. They were social animals that could hunt in groups, which increased their chances of success in catching prey. Cave bears, which lived in Europe and Asia, could reach lengths of up to 3 meters and weigh up to 1 ton. These omnivorous animals actively used caves for shelter, especially during the winter. Their powerful jaws allowed them to break bones and extract nutrients from bone marrow. Most of these remarkable creatures went extinct at the end of the Pleistocene, which is linked to a combination of climatic changes and intensive hunting by early humans who began to settle new territories. These changes in ecosystems led to the disappearance of habitats and food sources for megafauna. Research shows that by 10,000 years ago, there were no longer mammoths, saber-toothed cats, or giant sloths left on the planet. Scientists believe that the interaction between climate change and human actions led to this massive extinction of species, leaving behind only fossil remains that we can study today. The Pleistocene extinction of megafauna was one of the most dramatic events in Earth's history, when numerous large animals disappeared from its surface over a relatively short period of time, around 10,000 years. This process, which began approximately 50,000 years ago and ended around 10,000 years ago, was a true catastrophe for ecosystems dominated by majestic mammals. The world, once teeming with giant creatures, gradually emptied, as if nature had decided to erase an entire page from the book of life, leaving only shadows of past glory. This extinction was selective. Large terrestrial animals such as mammoths, woolly rhinos, and giant sloths disappeared first, while small mammals, birds, and marine organisms did not experience such sharp changes in their numbers. As a result, only memories remained of the time when megafauna was at its peak on the continents. Scientists believe that both climatic changes and human activity, which occupied new ecosystems and hunted large animals, contributed to this extinction. This tragic turn of events was a turning point in ecosystems, where ecological chains were disrupted and many species disappeared forever. Although some species, such as deer and boars, managed to adapt and survive, others faced an inevitable end. Unfortunately, many of these megafauna species left behind only fossil remains, which scientists now study to reconstruct the picture of that time. Archaeologists and paleontologists, such as Dr. Richard Malouin from the University of California, study these findings to understand how exactly climatic changes and human activity influence the survival of these species. Fossil remains found in different corners of the planet, from North America to Siberia, help create a more complete picture of what happened during this critical period. For example, mammoth remains found in Siberia have even preserved soft tissues, allowing scientists to conduct genetic research and reconstruct images of these giants. Thus, the Pleistocene extinction of megafauna is not just a historical fact, but a deep reminder of the fragility of life on our planet, of how quickly ecosystems can change, and of the importance of studying the causes and consequences of these changes. As a result of the Pleistocene extinction, the world lost its most impressive inhabitants, and this process left a noticeable mark on the biosphere, which is still felt today. In less than 10,000 years, many species disappeared, and this extinction was one of the most significant losses in the history of life on Earth. The hypothesis regarding the role of humans in the Pleistocene extinction is one of the most debated topics in archaeology and paleontology. Hunter-gatherers, armed with primitive but effective tools such as spears, formed organized groups capable of efficiently hunting even the largest and most dangerous animals. These groups actively employed hunting methods that required a high degree of coordination and strategy. For instance, around 30,000 years ago, humans began to colonize new territories, marking the start of the wave of extinction. The first victims were the Australian megatheres, giant lizards that went extinct around 40,000 years ago when humans reached the continent. Subsequently, over the following millennia, humans spread across Eurasia, hunting mammoths and woolly rhinos, which also disappeared due to hunting and climate change. In America, where human migration occurred via the Bering Land Bridge around 15,000 years ago, large mammals such as mastodons and saber-toothed tigers also became victims of intensive hunting. These animals, with their low reproductive rates, were unable to quickly restore their populations, making them particularly vulnerable. One factor contributing to this process was the use of fire to alter the natural environment. Humans set fires to grasslands and forests, not only improving hunting conditions, but also changing ecosystems and displacing the habitats of large animals. The introduction of new predators, such as dogs, also significantly influenced the hunting strategies of early humans, allowing them to efficiently hunt even more prey. For example, dogs, domesticated around 15,000 years ago, became not only hunting assistants but also competitors for large mammals. This combination of active hunting, habitat changes, and the introduction of new predators created an ecological catastrophe for many species that were unable to adapt to the new conditions. By the end of the Pleistocene, more than 40% of all large mammals had gone extinct, marking one of the most significant mass extinctions in Earth's history. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, appeared approximately 300,000 years ago in Africa, marking the beginning of an extraordinary journey that transformed the planet's appearance. Initially, they inhabited eastern Africa, finding shelter in caves and hunting wild animals. These early human groups were small and mobile, allowing them to adapt to various climatic conditions and ecosystems. They used simple tools like stone knives and spears and gradually developed the skills necessary for survival in harsh environments. Migrations began around 150,000 years ago when Homo sapiens began leaving Africa. The first groups crossed deserts and mountains, navigating through places like the Sinai Peninsula and the Bosporus Strait. They encountered diverse climatic conditions, from the harsh cold of Siberia to the tropical forests of Southeast Asia. These journeys were filled with challenges, crossing water bodies, adapting to new food sources, and interacting with local fauna. In Europe, they met Neanderthals, who were already living on that continent. These encounters were not always peaceful. However, research shows that there was interbreeding between the two species, as evidenced by the presence of Neanderthal DNA in the genomes of modern humans, especially those of non-African origin. The story of meeting Denisovans, another now extinct species living in Asia, is equally fascinating. Samples found in Denisova Cave in Siberia indicate that Homo sapiens not only encountered these species, but may have also exchanged genes with them. This interaction enriched the genetic diversity and allowed Homo sapiens to better adapt to new conditions. Their unique abilities in cooperation and innovation played a crucial role in successfully colonizing various continents. People began to create complex social structures, develop culture, art, and language. By 10,000 years ago, they had settled in Australia and the islands of Oceania, crossed the Bering Strait, and entered America. These migrations were made possible by the highly developed skills in hunting and gathering, as well as the ability to use fire for warmth and protection. Modern humans have conquered almost every corner of the planet, and today it can be said that Homo sapiens inhabits all continents, from polar territories to the tropics. It is interesting that their ability to adapt has allowed them to survive in the most diverse conditions, including extreme temperatures and high altitudes. For example, in the Andes, at heights above 3,000 meters, the ancestors of modern humans learned to survive by adapting to thin air and cold climate. The Holocene is an epoch that began with the end of the last ice age and is characterized by a more stable and warm climate. During this time, glaciers that covered large areas began to retreat, opening up new lands for habitation. Modern coastlines were formed, including the exposure of continents, which led to the creation of new ecosystems. This process resulted in significant changes in nature. Seas became warmer, and the climate became more predictable. As a result, the diversity of flora and fauna increased, creating conditions for the flourishing of various species, including humans. It was during the Holocene that humanity made a decisive step, transitioning from a nomadic lifestyle of hunters and gatherers to settled life and agriculture. The advent of agriculture became a catalyst for the establishment of the first permanent settlements, where people began to master farming methods, raise livestock, and accumulate surpluses of food. This transition was not only economic but also social, leading to the formation of the first cities and civilizations. New technologies emerged, including tools that facilitated land cultivation and harvesting. During this time, people began to build simple but complex structures, such as houses and storage facilities, indicating the growth of a settled lifestyle. Simultaneously, social structures were changing. Communities were organized around agricultural production, social roles and responsibilities were changing. People began to actively interact with their environment, which affected ecosystems. Forests were cleared for fields, and rivers and lakes were used for irrigation. This period was also marked by population growth, which necessitated more complex systems of management and organization. Urban planning began to develop, as evidenced by archaeological findings in places like Mesopotamia and the Nile Valley, where some of the first large cities with advanced water supply and sanitation systems emerged. The Holocene was a time when human influence on nature began to grow, and this influence continued to increase with the development of technologies and society. The appearance of writing, trade, and the first state formations was a logical continuation of the changes taking place in society. The rural population gradually became urban, leading to the emergence of cultural and scientific centers. These processes continue to influence the modern world and its ecosystems. Scientific research shows that it was during the Holocene that humanity experienced significant changes in its way of life, which became the foundation for future civilizations. The Neolithic Revolution, which occurred around 10,000 years ago, marked the turning point when humanity made a significant leap in its development. People began to engage in agriculture deliberately, which fundamentally transformed their way of life. Instead of relying on hunting and gathering, they learned to cultivate plants and domesticate animals. In the Fertile Crescent, known as the cradle of civilization, the first experiments in agriculture began. Here, in modern-day Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq, people started growing wheat and barley and domesticated sheep and goats. By the 9th century BCE, this region already had complex agricultural societies capable of producing surplus food, which contributed to population growth. In China, along the Yellow River, around 8,000 years ago, the first agricultural crops such as millet and rice appeared, allowing the local population not only to feed themselves, but also to engage in trade with neighbors. In Mesoamerica, starting from the 6th millennium BCE, people began to cultivate maize, beans, and squash, which later formed the basis for civilizations such as the Maya and Aztecs. The transition to a settled lifestyle led to the establishment of permanent settlements, which became centers of social life. People began to build homes, granaries, and later temples. The permanent population required a complex social organization, more advanced forms of governance, division of labor, and specialization, which contributed to the emergence of the first cities. At this time, a new culture based on collective labor emerged, making the creation of the first civilizations possible. The Neolithic Revolution allowed for the creation of surplus food supplies, which in turn ensured a stable population and facilitated the development of trade. As a result, by 4,000 years BCE, in regions such as Mesopotamia, cities with populations in the tens of thousands, such as Ur and Uruk, were already present, where crafts, science, and art flourished. Agriculture became not only a source of food, but also the foundation for the formation of a complex social structure, which fundamentally changed migration patterns and interactions between different cultures. The Holocene climatic optimum, which occurred approximately between 9 and 6,000 years ago, was a period when global temperatures were 1 to 2 degrees Celsius higher than today's. This warm and humid climate had a significant impact on ecosystems in various regions. In particular, in North Africa, the Sahara, now one of the driest deserts on Earth, was once covered with lush savannas and lakes. Research conducted by an international team of geologists and climatologists has shown that during this time, the Sahara had extensive water bodies, such as Lake Chad, which at that time occupied an area 8 times larger than its current size. These conditions created ideal living conditions, facilitating the migration of various human groups and the development of society. At the same time, in Northern Europe and the Arctic, warmer conditions led to increased vegetation and biodiversity. The increase in population due to the favorable climate contributed to the formation of early civilizations. For example, in Mesopotamia, where the climate was particularly generous, people began to actively engage in agriculture, leading to the emergence of the first cities, such as Ur and Uruk. During this time, new agricultural technologies were developed, such as irrigation, which allowed for the effective use of water, resulting in a significant increase in crop yields. According to archaeological excavations, around 7,000 years ago, the Nile already showed signs of settled agriculture, indicating that people began to cultivate the land and raise livestock. This period was also characterized by the growth of cultural exchange between different regions, as more accessible climatic conditions facilitated migration and interaction among peoples. For example, in Europe, there was active exchange of agricultural products and technologies, leading to the emergence of cultures such as the Neolithic corded ware culture. The increase in population and the development of agriculture also influenced social structures, leading to the formation of more complex societies with a division of labor. For instance, in Mesopotamia, the first forms of state administration appeared, which organized the distribution of resources and the tax system. It is important to note that this climatic optimum laid the foundation for the next stage of human history, when not only cities but also the first states emerged. Excavations in places like Çatalhöyük in Turkey show that people were already building complex houses and engaging in crafts during this time, indicating a high degree of social organization. The Holocene climatic optimum served as a true catalyst for the development of human civilization and the formation of cultural traditions that we can observe today. There are data indicating that during this time, the population in some regions grew to several 100,000, which in turn contributed to the formation of new cultural and ethnic groups. The Anthropocene is a proposed geological epoch characterized by the fact that human activity has become the dominant factor influencing ecosystems and geological processes on Earth. During this time, the impact of one species, Homo sapiens, has become comparable in scale to the natural forces that shape the planet. Humanity, with its technologies and industrial activities, has altered landscapes, destroyed ecosystems, and even changed the climate. Human activities have led to changes in the chemical composition of the atmosphere and oceans at levels previously unseen. For example, the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased from approximately 260 to 400 parts per million over the last 2 centuries, a result of burning fossil fuels and deforestation. Humans have become capable of moving vast amounts of rock, creating projects like dams and canals that have fundamentally altered the hydrological cycle. For instance, the construction of the Yellow River Dam in China has not only changed the local landscape, but also the ecosystems dependent on the natural flow of the river. Human impact also affects global biogeochemical cycles, as evidenced by changes in the carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus cycles. Such changes can lead to mass extinctions, as seen with coral reefs, which are suffering from ocean warming and increased water acidity. Research shows that over the past 30 years, more than half of the world's coral reefs have been affected by anthropogenic factors. In this context, the Anthropocene highlights the uniqueness of human activity. For the first time in Earth's history, a conscious being is capable of fundamentally altering natural processes. While previously natural forces shaped the planet, now humans influence these processes through conscious actions. This raises questions about the future of the planet and how humanity will cope with the consequences of its influence. A key aspect of the Anthropocene is not only the recognition of human impact on the environment, but also the need for a change in approaches to the use of natural resources. There are calls for more sustainable methods of management that can minimize negative impacts on ecosystems. Scientists like Professor David Armstrong argue that humanity must take responsibility for its actions and begin to act more consciously to prevent further degradation of the planet. It is important to note that the Anthropocene is not just a concept, but a reality that humanity is facing today. For example, according to UN estimates, in the 21st century, more than 1 billion people may face water scarcity due to climate change and unsustainable resource use. Humanity finds itself in a situation where its actions can lead to catastrophic consequences, and this requires a serious rethinking of our relationship with nature. In this context, the Anthropocene becomes not only a geological concept, but also a significant ethical challenge. The Industrial Revolution, which began in Britain at the end of the 18th century, marked a turning point in human history and our relationship with nature. This period, which lasted roughly until the middle of the 19th century, was when energy stored in fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas, over millions of years began to be released within just a few centuries. The 18th century saw the invention of the first steam engines by such inventors as James Watt, who significantly improved the steam engine in 1776, making it more efficient and practical for use in industry. Concurrently, the construction of factories began, with cities like Manchester and Liverpool becoming centers of textile production. For instance, Manchester's population grew from 50,000 in 1800 to over 200,000 by the 1830s. Factories using steam power became centers of textile production, leading to mass production and a decrease in the cost of fabrics, making them more accessible to the general population. At the same time, railways revolutionized the transportation of goods and people. The first public railway, Stockton and Darlington, opened in 1820, and soon after, work began on major routes like Liverpool and Manchester, which opened new horizons for trade and migration. Steamships like the Clipper in the 1830s ensured rapid delivery of goods across oceans, connecting continents and opening new markets for European products. This unprecedented increase in production capacity led to a rapid growth in population, which, according to census data, increased by nearly 30% in the first 50 years of the 19th century. Urbanization quickly spread across Europe and America. For example, London's population grew from 1 million in 1800 to more than 6 million by 1900. This process was accompanied not only by an increase in resource consumption, but also by a deterioration in the ecological situation. Cities lacked clean water, and air was polluted by factory emissions and steam engine fumes. As a result, natural ecosystems began to undergo significant changes, as forests were cleared for timber and new agricultural lands, and rivers and lakes were polluted by industrial waste. Coal mining increased, and by 1885, Britain was producing over 100 million tons of coal, becoming the primary source of energy for factories and railways. It became increasingly evident that humanity had entered a new era, where resources, consumed without control, were beginning to have a destructive impact on the planet. Consequently, the development of technologies and the mass use of fossil fuels not only transformed the appearance of cities and economies, but also became the cause of the first serious ecological problems that we continue to address today. Modern climate change, driven by human activity, represents one of the most serious threats to the planet. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century, emissions of carbon dioxide, methane, and other greenhouse gases have sharply increased. In particular, the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has risen from around 280 parts per million in the 18th century to more than 400 parts per million in the 21st century, which is the highest level in the last 800,000 years, according to research on ice cores from Antarctica. These gases trap heat, leading to global warming. The planet's energy balance is disrupted. More heat remains in the atmosphere, causing an increase in the average global temperature on Earth. Since 1880, the average temperature has risen by about 1 degree Celsius, and this change is already having a significant impact on climate conditions. Oceans, absorbing around 90% of the heat, are warming, which leads to their expansion and a rise in sea level. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, by the end of the century, sea level could rise by 1 meter, threatening coastal cities and ecosystems worldwide. Glaciers such as the Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets are melting at record rates, also contributing to sea level rise. Meanwhile, weather systems are becoming increasingly unstable. Rising temperatures lead to more intense storms, including hurricanes and typhoons, which are becoming more powerful and destructive. For example, Hurricane Katrina in 2005 was one of the deadliest hurricanes in U.S. history, causing the deaths of more than 1,800 people and causing damage worth $100 billion. Heat waves, which were once rare, are now becoming the norm, with temperatures exceeding 35 degrees Celsius in some regions. In Europe, the summer of 2018 was one of the hottest in recent decades, with temperatures reaching 40 degrees Celsius in some countries. Droughts are becoming more frequent and prolonged, negatively impacting agriculture. For example, the drought in the U.S. Midwest in 2013 led to a 30% reduction in corn yields, causing a sharp increase in food prices. Changes in seasonal cycles affect ecosystems and human communities, forcing plants and animals to adapt or go extinct. Many species, such as polar bears, are at risk of extinction due to climate change, which disrupts their natural habitats. Birds are changing their migration routes, and plants are beginning to bloom earlier than they did in the past. As a result, these changes can cause imbalances in ecosystems, affecting food chains and creating additional challenges for people dependent on agriculture and fisheries. A study conducted in Norway in 2019 showed that climate change is already affecting crop yields, and if current trends continue, many regions may face a significant decrease in food production by 2040. These factors highlight how human activity and greenhouse gas emissions not only change the climate, but also create a chain reaction that threatens the future of our planet. Mass extinction in the modern era is a process of species disappearance occurring at an unprecedented speed, far exceeding the natural extinction rate, which is approximately 1 to 2 species per million per year. Currently, this rate has increased by tens, if not hundreds of times, causing serious concern among scientists and ecologists. The modern biosphere, like a fragile home, is losing its diversity under the pressure of human activity. Habitat destruction is one of the key factors contributing to this process. For instance, in the 30s of the 20th century, active deforestation of tropical forests began, and since then, more than half of all tropical forests have been destroyed, leading to the disappearance of numerous plant and animal species. Environmental pollution also plays a destructive role. According to the World Health Organization, more than 90% of city populations breathe air containing levels of pollutants that exceed acceptable norms, negatively impacting the health and viability of many species. Overexploitation of natural resources, such as fish and wild animals, exacerbates the situation. In the last decades, fish stocks in the oceans have decreased by more than 60% due to intensive fishing. The introduction of invasive species, as seen with the red ant in Hawaii, leads to the destruction of local ecosystems, displacing native species and disrupting food chains. Climate change, caused by human activity, creates additional challenges for the survival of many species. The warming of oceans leads to coral bleaching and mass mortality of marine organisms. Unlike past mass extinctions caused by natural catastrophes such as asteroids or volcanic eruptions, the current extinction is a result of the actions of a single species, humans. Scientists like biologist Edward Wilson emphasize that if we do not change our behavior, we risk losing up to half of all species on Earth within the next century. Unlike natural extinctions that occurred over millions of years, modern extinction is happening over just a few decades, making it one of the most serious threats to the biosphere. Restoring lost diversity may take millions of years, and if the extinction rates do not decrease, we may find ourselves in a world where ecosystems can no longer perform their functions, such as producing oxygen, cleaning water, and maintaining the climate balance. Restoring lost diversity may take millions of years, and if the extinction rates do not decrease, we may find ourselves in a world where ecosystems can no longer perform their functions. Each change in an ecosystem, each disappeared species, is not just a loss of a species, but the destruction of a piece of a complex mosaic of life, on which the existence of all life on the planet depends. Coral reefs, often referred to as marine tropical forests, due to their extraordinary biological diversity, are on the brink of extinction. These ecosystems, which support more than 25% of all known marine species, are losing color and life due to climate change and ocean acidification. The bleaching of corals, which occurs as a result of rising water temperatures, causes corals to expel symbiotic algae, known as zooxanthellae, that provide them with nutrients and color. These algae live within the tissues of corals and supply up to 90% of the energy needed for their growth and recovery. When water temperature rises just 1 or 2 degrees Celsius above normal, corals begin to experience stress, leading to their bleaching. This process can be observed worldwide, from the Great Barrier Reef in Australia to the Caribbean Sea. For instance, in 2016, around 90% of corals on the Great Barrier Reef experienced bleaching, one of the most significant events in the history of observations. This phenomenon typically precedes mass coral mortality, and if temperatures do not normalize, many reefs could completely disappear. Additionally, the ocean continues to absorb excess carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, leading to its acidification. The pH of the ocean has decreased by 25% since the beginning of industrialization, making it more difficult for corals to form their calcium carbonate skeletons, which are essential for their structure and protection. As a result, coral reefs become more vulnerable to diseases and other stressors. The loss of reefs means the loss of habitats for thousands of marine organisms, including fish, mollusks, and starfish, which rely on these reefs for protection, food, and reproduction. According to scientists, if current trends continue, by the end of the 21st century, more than 90% of coral reefs may be at risk of extinction. According to data from the World Wildlife Fund, approximately 10 million hectares of tropical forests disappear each year, equivalent to the area of Portugal. These forests, renowned for their extraordinary biodiversity, fall victim to human greed in pursuit of short-term economic gains. Deforestation for the creation of agricultural land, pastures for livestock, plantations for coffee, palm oil, and rubber, as well as for road construction and mining, leads to the destruction of some of the richest ecosystems on Earth. For instance, since the beginning of the 21st century, more than 20% of the Amazon rainforests in Brazil have been destroyed, resulting in the loss of thousands of plant and animal species, many of which have not yet been discovered by science. The destruction of forests has severe ecological consequences, including soil erosion, which becomes more vulnerable to flooding and other natural disasters. This leads to the loss of fertile soil and makes agriculture less sustainable. Additionally, deforestation disrupts local climates, as forests play a crucial role in regulating temperature and precipitation. Forests absorb carbon dioxide, and their destruction exacerbates the problem of climate change, as released carbon re-enters the atmosphere. It is estimated that tropical forests absorb around 18% of global carbon dioxide, making them vital lungs of the planet. Trees also contribute to maintaining the water cycle. They evaporate water, creating precipitation essential for life. Their destruction alters rainfall patterns, potentially leading to droughts in one region and floods in another. Consequently, the destruction of tropical forests not only threatens biodiversity, but also endangers the existence of local communities that depend on forest resources for their survival and prosperity. Each year, millions of hectares are lost to deforestation, and this process continues to accelerate despite the recognition of its consequences. Anthropogenic landscapes are the result of human activity, where natural ecosystems have undergone significant changes or have been completely transformed. These territories now cover an increasingly large portion of the Earth's surface, and their impact on the surrounding environment is immeasurable. Agriculture, for instance, not only alters the landscape, but also creates new ecological conditions. To expand agricultural land, forests are cleared, wetlands are drained, and water systems are redirected. This leads to the fragmentation of natural ecosystems, where previously inhabiting species lose their familiar habitats. Urbanization also contributes to the creation of anthropogenic landscapes. Cities grow, consuming surrounding nature, creating asphalt jungles where biodiversity rapidly decreases. Infrastructure projects, such as roads and dams, sever connections between natural habitats, negatively affecting animal migration and plant dispersal. These changes create new conditions where some species can adapt and survive, while others are on the brink of extinction. For example, invasive plant and animal species that can quickly adapt to anthropogenic landscapes begin to dominate, displacing local species that cannot adapt as quickly. This not only disrupts the balance of ecosystems, but also threatens the sustainability of natural resources, such as water and soil. As a result, anthropogenic landscapes become places where biodiversity faces severe challenges. Currently, more than 70% of the Earth's surface has been subjected to anthropogenic impact, making this one of the most pressing issues of our time. The increasing pressure on natural resources requires a change in approaches to managing territories to preserve what remains of natural ecosystems. Urban ecosystems represent a new type of habitat that forms at the intersection of nature and human activity. These artificial landscapes, composed of asphalt, concrete, and glass, create unique ecological conditions, such as heat islands. Temperatures in these areas can be several degrees higher than in the surrounding environment, due to the absorption and re-emission of sunlight. For instance, in the centers of large cities like New York or Tokyo, temperatures can reach 15 degrees Celsius, higher than in the suburbs. The altered hydrological regime also plays a significant role in shaping the urban ecosystem. Rainwater does not penetrate the soil but runs off onto sidewalks and streets, creating a risk of flooding and changing the soil composition. In such conditions, new types of soil rich in organic matter emerge, differing from rural soils. Some species, such as urban pigeons and sparrows, have adapted to life near humans and now make up a significant part of the urban fauna. Urban pigeons can find food in the most unexpected places, while sparrows, once widespread worldwide, have noticeably declined in recent years due to changes in their habitat. Rats, foxes, and raccoons actively colonize urban territories, using abandoned areas and buildings as shelters. For example, foxes can live in parks and even on the outskirts of large cities, hunting rodents and insects. In the urban environment, plants find new opportunities for growth. They colonize cracks in asphalt and abandoned areas like old factories and vacant lots. Species like dandelions and clover become symbols of nature's resilience. Urban ecosystems essentially become laboratories of evolution. Organisms living in these places adapt to new conditions much faster than in natural environments. For example, studies show that some bird species have changed their vocalizations to drown out the noise of city life. Meanwhile, studies in London show that urban sparrows have become smaller due to changes in diet and habitat. Therefore, cities are not just places for human life, but active participants in natural processes, where the struggle for survival and adaptation of species to changing conditions continues. In cities where population density reaches record levels, such as Mumbai, one can observe how some plant species, like violets and geraniums, have even colonized the most inhospitable corners. According to ecologists, up to 30% of urban space can be occupied by green areas, which not only improve air quality, but also provide habitats for various animals. In recent decades, there has been a significant increase in the movement to protect nature, which aims to safeguard wild ecosystems and preserve biological diversity. Currently, more than 360 countries have established protected areas, including national parks and reserves that serve as sanctuaries for endangered species. For instance, in the year 2000, the Amboseli National Park was established in Kenya, which became home to more than 2,000 elephants and other wildlife. These parks not only protect flora and fauna, but also provide people with the opportunity to enjoy the beauty of nature, thereby promoting ecotourism. An example of a successful restoration project is the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone National Park in the United States in 1995. The return of these predators helped restore the ecosystem by increasing populations of other species, such as elk and beavers. Marine protected areas play a significant role in nature conservation by protecting marine ecosystems from overfishing and pollution. According to the World Wildlife Fund, currently, protected marine zones cover approximately 7% of the world's oceans. The creation of ecological corridors is becoming an important step in ensuring the migration of species between fragmented habitats, which helps maintain genetic diversity and the resilience of populations. For example, in Canada, a project is underway to create corridors for grizzly bears, which helps prevent their isolation and promotes the recovery of their numbers. These efforts to restore degraded landscapes and protect wild nature represent humanity's attempt to find a balance between development and the preservation of Earth's natural heritage, which is especially relevant in the context of global climate change and the loss of biodiversity. In 2000, within the framework of the Convention on Biological Diversity, participating states agreed on a strategy to increase the area of protected territories to 7% of land and 10% of seas by 2020. Therefore, the importance of nature conservation and the protection of wild flora and fauna is becoming increasingly apparent, and there is growing international recognition of the need for such measures. In this context, it is worth mentioning the work of the organization Greenpeace, which actively advocates for the protection of ecosystems and against destructive practices such as deforestation and ocean pollution. The creation of protected areas and ecological initiatives not only helps preserve natural resources, but also serves as an example for future generations about the importance of caring for the planet. It is worth noting that in 2006, according to the UN, more than 7 million hectares of forests were restored as a result of international greening programs. Sustainable development is a concept that allows for the satisfaction of the needs of the current generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This idea emerged in the 20th century, but gained widespread attention after the publication of the report Our Common Future in 1987, prepared by the World Commission on Environment and Development under the chairmanship of Gro Harlem Brundtland. According to this concept, society should be in harmony with natural systems, which means using resources at a rate that does not exceed their natural regeneration. For instance, if we talk about forests, this means that logging should be balanced with natural growth and regeneration to prevent resource depletion. Sustainable development also requires minimizing waste produced by human activity, as the environment must be able to handle the processing of these waste materials. An example of this is the concept of zero waste, which implies that all products and materials can be recycled and reused, reducing the burden on landfills and oceans. To achieve sustainable development, it is necessary to consider the balance between economic, social, and environmental aspects, often referred to as the triple bottom line. This means that economic growth should not come at the expense of environmental degradation or social justice. For example, in countries where sustainable development programs are successfully implemented, there is an increase in jobs in green sectors, such as renewable energy and sustainable agriculture, which, in turn, contributes to social well-being. It is important to understand that sustainable development is not just a trend or a fashionable term. It is a necessity driven by global problems such as climate change, pollution, and resource depletion. To address this, strategies need to be developed and implemented that ensure sustainable resource use and ecosystem protection. For instance, transitioning to renewable energy sources such as solar or wind energy can reduce carbon dioxide emissions and decrease dependence on fossil fuels. Sustainable development is not only an environmental, but also a social challenge that requires the participation of all sectors of society, including governments, businesses, and citizens. All these elements should work together to create conditions in which future generations can live in a healthy and safe world. At the state level, this can manifest as legislation aimed at protecting the environment, and at the local community level, as initiatives for restoring natural landscapes. All this underscores that sustainable development is not a one-time action, but a long-term strategy that requires a comprehensive approach and cooperation. Sustainable development should become the fundamental principle for all aspects of our lives, encompassing economy, ecology, and social interaction. It is important to understand that without clear actions and a conscious approach to resource use, we risk leaving future generations with destroyed ecosystems and depleted reserves. In this context, the concept of sustainable development becomes not just an ideal, but a necessity that requires attention and action today to ensure a sustainable future for all. The shift towards renewable energy sources is increasingly becoming an integral part of the global energy revolution. For instance, in the year 2000, Germany began actively implementing solar panels, and by the 21st century, the country became a leader in the number of installed solar systems, which now cover the roofs of houses and even entire solar farms. Currently, more than 30% of Germany's electricity is generated from solar energy. Wind turbines installed on hills and at sea have become symbols of a new approach to energy. According to the International Energy Agency, by 2020, the installed capacity of wind power plants in Europe reached 142 gigawatts, significantly reducing dependence on fossil fuels. Geothermal power plants, utilizing the heat of the earth, demonstrate how to effectively use natural resources. For example, in Iceland, more than 60% of energy is produced from geothermal sources, allowing the country to minimize carbon emissions and reduce pollution levels. Transitioning to renewable energy sources not only helps reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also significantly improves air and water quality. According to the World Health Organization, transitioning to clean energy can prevent millions of premature deaths caused by air pollution. Additionally, this transition creates new jobs and fosters modern technologies. For example, in the United States, from 2010 to 2020, the number of jobs in the renewable energy sector doubled, indicating growing interest in this area. Solar and wind energy are becoming increasingly affordable due to the reduction in technology costs. The cost of solar panels has fallen by more than 80% over the past 10 years, and wind turbines have become much more efficient. Transitioning to renewable energy sources allows humanity to meet its energy needs without depleting the planet's resources and disrupting its climate balance. In 2020, according to a UN report, renewable energy accounted for more than 22% of global energy consumption, confirming the steady growth of this sector. Rewilding, or the restoration of ecosystems, has become a significant direction in nature conservation and the rehabilitation of degraded landscapes. This involves active efforts to return lands to their natural state and functions, including abandoned agricultural lands, forests recovering from logging, and wetlands returning to life after drainage. An example of this is the project to restore wetlands in eastern England, which began in 2002 to restore an ecosystem that had been destroyed over several decades. As part of this project, drainage was reintroduced, which helped restore natural water bodies and increase biodiversity in these areas. A key element of ecosystem restoration is the reintroduction of endangered species. In 2010, wolves were reintroduced to Scotland, significantly altering the dynamics of the local ecosystem. These predators reduced the population of deer, allowing vegetation to recover on pastures and forests. The restoration of beaver populations, such as on the River Avon in England, has been a breakthrough. These ecosystem engineers create dams that help form water bodies, thereby restoring flooded areas and creating new habitats for numerous animal and plant species. These projects not only increase biodiversity, but also contribute to combating climate change. For instance, restoring forests on logged areas allows for the absorption of large amounts of carbon from the atmosphere. According to the World Wildlife Fund, 1 hectare of restored forest can absorb up to 10 tons of carbon per year. Restoring wetlands, on the other hand, helps reduce the risk of floods and erosion, as these ecosystems act as natural sponges, absorbing excess water and regulating groundwater levels. Ecosystem restoration projects also create opportunities for ecotourism, bringing significant economic benefits to local communities. In Norway, for example, programs to restore wild nature have attracted tourists interested in seeing rare animal species and enjoying untouched landscapes. The Wild Scotland project in 2009 demonstrated how ecotourism can support the economy while also contributing to environmental conservation and the return of ecosystems to their natural state. Modern efforts to restore ecosystems aim to return nature to places where it has been displaced by human activity. Ecosystem restoration is not just a trend, but a necessity to preserve the planet and ensure a better future for future generations. Successful examples of ecosystem restoration projects around the world underscore the importance of this work. In 2020, in the Netherlands, the Dutch Landscape Project restored more than 15,000 hectares of natural areas, bringing back numerous endangered species to these regions. Changes occurring on Earth depend on a multitude of factors, and each of our decisions can become a turning point in the planet's development. The potential future of Earth can be envisioned as a branching tree of possibilities, where each path leads to different scenarios. One such path is the restoration of biodiversity and sustainable coexistence between humans and nature. For instance, in 2020, Kenya completed a project to restore forests by planting over 7 million trees, which helped increase the population of local birds and other animals. Sustainable agriculture, based on agroforestry, already allows farmers to earn a stable income while restoring ecosystems. In regions such as Scandinavia, technologies are actively being implemented to reduce carbon emissions, which contributes to the overall improvement of air quality and climate. In Puerto Rico, after Hurricane Maria in 2017, local residents began to rebuild their communities using principles of sustainable development, creating more resilient and adaptable ecosystems. On the other end of the spectrum, there are scenarios leading to the degradation of ecosystems and climate destabilization. If humanity continues to ignore the problems of climate change and deforestation, it will lead to mass extinctions of species, as seen with polar bears in the Arctic, where their population has decreased by more than 30% over the last 30 years. An increase in ocean temperatures by 1 degree Celsius has already caused the death of coral reefs in Australia, highlighting the fragility of marine ecosystems. Such processes can lead to a chain reaction where climate change affects food security, causing population migration and conflicts over resources. It is important to understand that the future of Earth is not predetermined, and each of our decisions today matters. For example, in 2020, Germany passed a law obliging the country to reduce carbon emissions by 68% by 2030. This step not only demonstrates political will, but can also serve as an example for other countries. Ultimately, the future of our planet will depend on the collective actions of humanity in the coming decades. For instance, a study conducted by the World Health Organization in 2019 indicated that improving the state of the environment is directly linked to an increase in expected lifespan by 2 years. Each of these directions can become a reality if we act consciously and purposefully. It is important to remember that the future depends on our choices today, not tomorrow. In 2020, at the UN Climate Change Conference in Madrid, more than 100 countries signed an agreement on the need to prevent global temperature from rising by more than 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. This fact confirms that international cooperation can be the key to solving global environmental problems and preserving the planet for future generations. Through millions of years, Earth will continue its geological and evolutionary journey, completely independent of the fate of humanity. The drift of continents, which began around 100 million years ago, will continue, forming entirely new geographical landscapes. Africa will gradually collide with Europe, leading to the closure of the Mediterranean Sea and the formation of new mountain systems, similar to the Alps but much taller. This collision will occur at such a speed that in geological time, over a few million years, enormous faults and uplifts will form, altering the familiar relief. Australia, moving northward, will encounter new climatic conditions and ecosystems, causing flora and fauna to adapt to these new conditions. The Atlantic Ocean will expand, while the Pacific Ocean will contract due to subduction processes, where one tectonic plate descends beneath another, creating powerful earthquakes and volcanoes along the Pacific Ring of Fire. This geological movement will not stop, creating new archipelagos and continents that will be inhabited by entirely new species. The evolution of plants and animals will also undergo significant changes. In conditions where many modern species will go extinct, new organisms will emerge to fill the ecological niches left vacant. For example, in place of extinct mammals, new large herbivores may arise, adapted to life in the changed conditions, with more efficient survival mechanisms. Forests will dominate on new continents, and they will be home to unique tree species that will differ significantly from those we know today. These will be magnificent plants capable of surviving in conditions of increased heat and altered atmospheric composition. In water bodies, evolution will lead to the appearance of new life forms, possibly fish with completely unique adaptations, allowing them to survive in changing aquatic conditions. These species will develop and adapt to new ecosystems, creating complex food chains. Time will be relentless, and Earth will continue to transform, creating diverse biomes and unique ecosystems that will differ from anything we know. Thus, a planet that has existed for more than 4.5 billion years will continue its history of changes, heralding new epochs of life and geological processes. In millions of years, continents will look entirely different, with new forms of life adapting and developing in conditions that we can only imagine. For example, climate change caused by active volcanic eruptions will create new ecosystems adapted to higher temperatures and altered atmospheric composition. Scientific research shows that such changes occur cyclically, and Earth has already experienced such mass extinctions and subsequent evolutionary explosions. In the course of evolution, species will emerge that can survive in conditions where the surrounding environment becomes more aggressive, such as new reptiles adapted to life in arid conditions or aquatic mammals with unique navigation systems in murky waters. All this is just a part of the incredible transformation that will continue as long as Earth orbits in space, unaware of what is happening on its surface. This continuity of change is a characteristic feature of the history of our planet over all the billions of years of its existence. The Sun, a star of medium size, has its own destiny that is inextricably linked to the history of Earth. Approximately 5 billion years from now, when the hydrogen reserves in its core are depleted, the Sun will begin to transform into a red giant. This stage will be characterized by an increase in its radius to 100 times its current size. At this point, the internal processes of hydrogen fusion into helium will slow down, and the core will begin to contract, leading to an increase in temperature and pressure. As a result of this contraction, the outer layers of the star will expand, engulfing nearby planets. At this stage, Mercury and then Venus will be destroyed, swallowed by the expanding Sun. Earth, located about 150 million kilometers away, will also face catastrophic changes long before the Sun reaches its orbit. The Sun's luminosity parameters will increase by about 25%, leading to a sharp rise in temperature on Earth. Oceans will begin to evaporate, turning into clouds of water vapor, and the atmosphere, as we know it, will become uninhabitable. As a result of this process, Earth will become a scorched desert, similar to the current state of Venus, where the surface temperature exceeds 400 degrees Celsius. During these changes, increasingly intense ultraviolet radiation will destroy any remaining organisms, while most of the Earth's surface will be subjected to thermal effects, turning it into a lifeless space. This dramatic process, when a star dies, is only a part of the natural cosmic cycle in which stars are born, live, and die. The dying Sun, in the end, will shed its outer layers, forming a planetary nebula, while the remaining core will become a white dwarf, gradually cooling over billions of years. This final stage, when the star loses its brightness, marks the end of the Sun's life cycle and leaves behind traces in the form of clouds of gas and dust, which can serve as building material for new stars and planets. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request.